Hey guys, this is Eric Young, and you're listening to Booking the Territory.
Hey, this is Ring of Honor superstar Donovan Dijak, and you're listening to Booking the Territory Pro Wrestling Podcast.
This is the one-man gang. You're listening to Booking the Territory Pro Wrestling Podcast.
This is Booking the Territory, a pro wrestling podcast hosted by Mike Mills, Hardbody Harper from Wildcat Sports and Entertainment, and the mentally irregular Doc Turner. This podcast is a mix of your topics and thoughts in the world of pro wrestling, along with interviews and discussions with current independent stars and your favorite stars from the past. And now, here's your host, Mike Mills.
All right, everybody, I appreciate you downloading and checking out this week's episode of Booking the Territory's Pro Wrestling Podcast. Thanks to all of you who download the show and keep helping us grow the show each and every week. As you can see from the title of this week's episode, this week we are welcoming in from the 605 Superpodcast, the great Brian Last. You probably also know who Brian Last is from the MLW podcast, the Jim Cornette Experience, because the great Brian Last is Jim Cornette's co-host on MLW Radio and the Jim Cornette Experience. So I appreciated Brian giving me about an hour and 15 minutes of his time. We had a great discussion about classic wrestling. If you have not checked out Brian Last's show, the 605 Super Podcast, you need to do so. If you are a fan of classic wrestling, you will enjoy the discussions that they have, man. They talk about so many things that you just may not have knowledge of from the different territories, and it's fabulous discussion. The guests that they bring on are knowledgeable. They may not be people who you've heard of, but they are people who have a lot of information about the days of the territories that you would have never known. For example, right now, they were interviewing Polish Joe from the AWA, and man, the guy's got fascinating stories about the inner workings of the AWA back in the 80s and I guess early 90s before the AWA folded shop. So great discussion. Check out Brian Last on the 605 Super Podcast along with his co-host David Bixenspan, and check him out on MLW Radio's Jim Cornette Experience. It's always a good time. They both shows are really great. So Brian and I, like I said, we talk classic wrestling, and it's a fun time. I want to thank everyone who helps support the show. When you retweet the show, when you share the show on Facebook and all that good stuff, man, it helps grow the numbers. Honestly, we couldn't do it without you. So I'm grateful for the fans. I'm grateful for everything that you do. Don't worry about Doc Turner. I know he can be a bit of an ass sometimes, but we are appreciative to everything you do with the show. If you want to help continue to support the show, do so by checking us out on Facebook, facebook.com/Booking the Territory. And while you're there and liking the page and helping us grow the numbers, click the Shop Now button and check out our T-shirt shop and get you a Booking the Territory podcast T-shirt. You can get 20% off of your order if you use promo code SHIRTOID20. Also, first-time listeners, because you're checking us out because you are a fan of the great Brian Last, subscribe to the show however you get your podcast, whether that's iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, TuneIn Radio. We're all there. Click the subscribe button. We'd greatly appreciate it. It helps grow our numbers. It helps our downloads. And we do this show for wrestling fans just like you. We're a bunch of wrestling fans, and we like to have fun by talking some wrestling. So hopefully we can help your day go by at work and all that good stuff, or your drive to and from work. Give us a couple of 5-star reviews if you can on iTunes or Stitcher. Greatly would appreciate that as well. Follow us on Twitter if you can at BTT_podcast. We've also got our YouTube channel up and running. I've just started loading the interviews, like the full 3-hour conversation with the one-man gang up on our YouTube channel. If you can give us a subscribe there, that would be greatly appreciated. Like I said, I've got all the interviews there, the interviews with Donovan Dijak from Ring of Honor, the Beer City Bruiser from Ring of Honor, Sam Houston from the old Territory days, and WWF as it was known at that time. So I really appreciate all of you who they have subscribed on the YouTube channel so far. The YouTube channel is relatively new, so we don't have too many subscribers yet, but help us grow those numbers, and we would appreciate it. Like I said, we're not going to do I think I mentioned it, we're not going to do our wrestling review this week, and it's mainly because we just ran out of time. We did catch Raw, but none of us were able to meet at a time conducive to recording a show where all three of us were here. So rather than me babble on about my thoughts on Raw and the pay-per-view, Money in the Bank, we will save that hopefully for the coming weeks, because we may run into a similar issue coming up next week. But my quick thoughts on Raw, I thought it was an average show. I think the bigger news at this point is the Roman Reigns suspension. I did get one question from Jason asking if I thought it was an angle. Jason, thanks for the email to bookingtheterritory@gmail.com. Kairos also on Twitter, thank you. I don't know if it's an angle at this point, but it's very intriguing that he's gotten suspended, considering the other buff bodies that are in the WWE that seem to never have wellness policy violation, and I'm just gonna leave it at that because I don't want to get in any kind of trouble or anything. So that's my thoughts on that. Alan, I appreciate your email as well. I'm gonna try to address that next week. But look, man, I'm thankful, and yes, Alan, I jumped out of the seat of my pants when Sasha's theme hit, and I got in trouble, and I was on I was on the sofa for the night. Anyone who listens to this show knows that I'm the biggest Sasha Banks fan that there is, and my wife wasn't too happy with my eruption of Sasha Banks when she came out. So, thank you. Before I jump over to my discussion with the great Brian Last, I want to say thanks to our sponsors, Better Choices, and thanks to the Wrestling Palace in Traders Village in Dallas, Texas, for all that you do for the show. If you need or in the market for wrestling memorabilia, check out my friends, the Wrestling Palace, on Facebook. Just search the Wrestling Palace, and you will find everything you can possibly ever imagine. Contact them, and they can hook you up with some great stuff for your wrestling collectibles, so to say. That is about it before my discussion with the great Brian Last. So, like I said, first up, we got the great Brian Last. And then next, because Doc and I were not able to record an interview or a discussion on Raw review and everything this week, Doc and I did the top 5 people that we would hire. I should say top 5 wrestlers that we would hire if we were starting a wrestling promotion. And I gotta be honest with you, Doc's picks were probably not as typical as you would think that would be from him. He was he had some surprises. So you're going to I think personally you will be surprised by Doc's picks on the top 5 that he chose. Mine may have been a little bit more predictable. I can tell you this: I did run a poll on who I thought. What was the poll? I'm trying to remember as I'm recording this. My poll said, which of these wrestling legends do you hire first if you are starting a wrestling promotion? And you, the listeners, we got 241 votes, so it wasn't a lot, but it was it was over the weekend on a Friday when people were at work. But the top 5 people, or the top 4 people on the poll, because Twitter only lets you list 4. I had Steve Austin, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, and The Rock. Well, Steve Austin gathered 38% of the votes, so that would make him one from our listeners. The Rock was 31%, Dusty Rhodes was 18%, and Ric Flair was 13%. Again, this is wrestling legends that you would hire first if you were starting a promotion. So, interesting poll. We got another one out there regarding wrestling bookers or matchmakers. So check us out at BTT_podcast and go vote in that poll for us, because I think that's what next week's discussion is going to be surrounded by coming up. So appreciate everybody who voted in the poll. Doc and I will cover our top 5 at the end of my discussion with the great Brian Last. So, without anything else, let's turn it over to my discussion with the great Brian Last. I appreciate you all tuning in to Booking the Territory Pro Wrestling Podcast. Obviously, I caught wind of your show from one of the only podcasts I listen to is Jim Cornette's. Heard about 605 on there, and being that I've been doing my own thing for about a year now, I was like, I heard about 605, so it's like, okay, well, I got to give it a listen. And I just got to say, it's completely different than most other shows. You guys, it's kind of a question, but at the same time, just a comment. You guys cover what I call, and this might not be the appropriate term, like the dark period of wrestling to me. And what I mean by that is, it's kind of classic, but classic in a sense that, like, I'm born in '75, so I grew up watching Mid-South. Mid-South was my home territory, obviously in New Orleans, and we got a little bit of world class too. But I guess around as the territories were dying, to me that was like almost a dark period of wrestling. Maybe that's not the right term, but it feels like you guys cover that and you cover it well. Like, how do you classify that era if you had to give it a term of wrestling?
Ooh, it's hard to say. you know, when people say, you know, what do you cover on your show? And you know, because we call it classic wrestling. I always tell people it's classic wrestling and cult wrestling favorites. And I always tell people my cutoff is 2001, and it's for a few reasons. One is that's when Dennis Carluzzo died, and obviously Dennis is a regular presence on the show. He was a presence in my life. He was a great friend of mine. And the other is that's when it just everything changes. It's when WCW goes under, it's when ECW goes under, and that's when it just becomes this monopoly for Vince McMahon. And Japan at the time too just completely died. You know, I wouldn't call it the Dark Ages just because I feel that if you look at it from a historical point of view, it's the opposite. There were more people going to wrestling and watching wrestling then than now. You know,
that's true.
Dave Meltzer tweeted out something very interesting and very true this week. And I always like seeing people. I always like when he writes this because he has such an authoritative voice that people listen. It's that the WWE is a massive company and they have all these different revenue streams and they have he didn't tweet all this because that wouldn't have fit into 140 characters, but you get the point. But you know, if you look at it, it has all these revenue streams that never existed before for any classic wrestling company or any, you know, all-time wrestling company. But if you look at the actual numbers of people watching and attending his shows, it's less than ever before. Now they may spend more money per person than ever before in the past, but less people attend wrestling. Less people attend wrestling now. Less people attend Vince McMahon's shows now than attended his shows in 1984 or 83 or 82. You know, like this is just this fucking myth that that he, you know, he saved wrestling from the smoke-filled arenas, and he was running the same arenas that he always ran and that everyone else. It's just, you know, he has this propaganda that works for the media because they don't give a shit. They don't know wrestling.
They don't. No. The mainstream media doesn't. They can act like they do, but they don't.
And on the topic of Mid-South, I love Mid-South. Mid-South is like, I don't know if you heard, we talked a little bit about it this week on the show. Mid-South.
I did. I actually got to that part of it, but I was going to ask you that, so I'm glad you're going there because you're. Let me ask you real quick. Aren't you from the Northeast?
I'm from New York.
Okay, so that's amazing to me because, you know, keep in mind, as I asked you about Mid-South, like I'm, you know, grew up 75, so I'm in the deep part of Mid-South territory, obviously, and so that's the territory I grew up watching. And when you said you were a big Mid-South fan, I was like, well, how in the hell was he getting Mid-South? And I know you've talked about the tape trading too, that you've done a lot of that. I was like, how did he get so invested in Mid-South growing up in New York? But go ahead, yeah.
But people would talk about it. People would say, you know, Dave Meltzer would write in the Observer. I started getting the Observer when I was 13. I was born in 79, so I'm a few years after you. And when I was 13 in 93, I started getting the Observer. And every now and then it'd be a little comment in there about how good Mid-South was. And when I started getting tape lists, everything I would see would talk about how great Mid-South was. And when I thought about different wrestlers, it seemed like everyone went through there at one time. You know, everyone. And a lot of people were bigger stars there than anywhere else, like JYD, for instance. Ted DiBiase. I mean, you know, Million Dollar Man was a major star, but, you know, it's a different animal, Ted DiBiase in Mid-South. And all these guys. And so I started trading for stuff, and I would see a little bit here and there. And then around 95, I bought a major collection from someone whose name was Steve Minari. He was a major tape trader in the 80s, and he was like really close friends with Bruiser Brody. And he just had someone who would tape him Mid-South Wrestling each week on a 4-hour tape. You know, every 4 weeks he would send it to him. And I have the letters. In exchange, all the guy wanted was squash matches, just matches with faceless jobbers. It's the weirdest tape trading deal I've ever heard of. And he got that. So I got that, and I was able to just pour through everything from, you know, early 84 until the very end. And then there was some stuff from 81 and 82. And then I had all the house show stuff. And then after that, I just started putting together my collection and filling in gaps. And, you know, a lot of it is just because, you know, you could say a lot of good and bad about Bill Watts, but Bill Watts demanded his guys worked hard. And it shows, and it shows the matches. I mean, those house show matches, beyond the heat, which is just such a unique animal nowadays because nothing has any fucking heat. Beyond the heat, which lifts everything up, the guys are kicking the shit out of each other. And that's all you want to see in wrestling. And I still search for that stuff. And actually, we're not recording yet, right?
No, we're actually rolling.
Oh, we are? Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I'll say it anyway. Someone got in touch with me. I won't say who. And they apparently lived in New Orleans as well. And taped Mid-South Wrestling on VHS starting in 1980 and have the entire JYD Freebirds feud and all the local promos on tape, which is stuff that's never gotten out there. It's never been in distribution. And that's like a holy grail. I mean, there's several things you think about that you want to see. Everyone brings up Tommy Rich against Buzz Sawyer in Atlanta, and that, the last battle of Atlanta, that people say doesn't exist on tape. Some people say there's one guy who may have it. It's to the point where people don't think it exists. For years, it was Slaughter and Kernodle against Steamboat and Youngblood. People said that didn't exist, and then all of a sudden it turned up, and a couple copies turned up. And the Freebird JYD feud is another thing. I recently found on YouTube, and I was blown away that this was on YouTube and no one had really posted or talked about it. I found the famous blinding angle, the angle where the Freebirds blinded JYD.
Wait, this is on YouTube?
It's on YouTube. See, because here's the thing.
Jesus. I got to look this up now.
It happened twice, because when they went to Georgia, when Buck Robley took over the booking in Georgia, they did it a second time. So when at first I'm watching it, and actually that's what I did. I Googled the blinding, and I got the Georgia one, and then I noticed in like the side column that says recommendations or what's next, the other blinding, and I said, holy shit, that can't be the other blinding, and boom, there it is.
Wow, yeah.
There's the other blinding. And, the guy who hit me up, he said that he has like footage of like the Freebirds coming out on TV with like, blindfolds on with canes mocking the JYD. And I would die to see that stuff.
Let me tell you a story about this. And obviously there's no way to verify this. So, take it for what it's worth. When they did the blinding angle with JYD in Mid-South, there was a mall in New Orleans called the Plaza. It was in New Orleans East. Anyone who listens to this that has ever been to New Orleans or knows a lot about New Orleans will know where New Orleans East is. It's no longer a mall anymore. There's a Lowe's on that property ever since Hurricane Katrina destroyed it. But there was a mall there. When they did the JYD blinding angle, this is how, if we want to throw around the term kayfabe, things were back in the day. They actually took JYD into the mall with a wrap around his eyes and had him walking around the mall with like a blind thing, like it was like a wrap around his head that covered his eyes, so that he could look like he was blind, like to sell it. I was telling One Man Gang this because I had him on the show. I don't think we were recording when I was telling this. He goes, I don't remember that, but he goes, in Watts' territory, I believe it because of how. Watts really, he wanted the realism to the point you just made. They would kick the shit out of each other. They would kill each other. The heat was ridiculous. That was just how Watts ran his territory,
Yeah.
So that's an amazing story that I'm like, I wish there were cell phone cameras back then to capture. Now you wouldn't have had the kayfabe would have been dead too, but if you had cell phone cameras back then, someone obviously probably would have captured it.
Yeah, however, if you had cell phone cameras back then, Mid-South Wrestling would have been put out of business because of the lawsuits of people beating up the fans. Right. Like the heels kicking the shit out of those fans. They would have put out, TMZ would have just had an entire page of Mid-South videos of heels beating up fans.
One Man Gang said he was talking about the old Municipal Auditorium in New Orleans where they would run their shows in New Orleans. And he said, what we would do is, he said, as heels, I would have I would be geared up, obviously, for my match, but my bags were in my car. That way I did not have to go back. I could just go straight to my car, man, to get out the building. Especially if he was in like a main event that night. He says, I just would walk straight to my car, because he said the cops would kind of help you in the arena, but once you got to the back, you were pretty much on your own. And he said we would just hop in the car and go. So it's just that territory. It's funny you say that. I was wondering how you got into it. That makes sense, especially because I know on your show you oftentimes talk about the tape trading aspect of everything that you were involved in with that. So that's cool, man. I had no clue the blinding angle was on YouTube. I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, blew me away.
No idea.
Blew me away. You would think someone would post that on a message board. It would get around. I couldn't believe both blinding angles are on YouTube. I'd seen the Georgia one. I'd never seen the Mid-South one. This is just like 2 months ago I discovered it.
Oh geez, yeah, I gotta look that up. Mid-South was just fun to watch. We would get it Saturday afternoons in New Orleans. It was like channel 26 or something down there, and it was I would be upset with my mother when she would want to go run errands on a Saturday afternoon, like because we didn't have a VCR, It was like you catch it or you miss it. And that was it. There was no other way means. Today's kids will never know the loss of not having another means of watching it.
So let me ask you a second. Let me turn the tables and make this my interview now.
No, go ahead.
I'm taking over every show I'm on. Listen, we recently had a discussion on 605 about this when John McAdam, another legendary tape trader, came on the show, and it was really interesting. And I'd like to get your opinion on it. He was saying, JYD leaves Mid-South Wrestling in the summer of 1984. He leaves without giving notice. He walks out on Bill Watts, goes to the World Wrestling Federation, where he was, I would say, for the first year and a half that he was there, he was the second most popular babyface to Hulk Hogan.
Yeah.
And so he leaves, and there's this void. And it's not just a lead babyface void, but it's a lead African-American babyface void. And various people, as you know, were brought in to fill that role. The Snowman, best forgotten probably.
Yes.
All sorts of guys. I think everyone but Iceman King Parsons was tried out in that role.
Mm-hmm.
And Butch Reed was at first a heel, and then they turned him babyface shortly thereafter. And the question was Butch Reed popular enough with those fans that he could have, if they had really run with him hard, that he could have fit that role? Or was it impossible for anyone to replace the Dog?
I think it was impossible for anyone. The only guy who could have done it would have been Iceman King Parsons. I firmly believe that. It's hard. I'm gonna reference our One Man Gang discussion again because we talked for a long time about this when he was on our show. And One Man Gang and I, as we were talking, Gang said the thing about JYD that people need to realize is he could get white and black people in the building. In the late 70s, early 80s, I mean, we weren't in the civil rights movement at that point, but JYD had a way of bringing people of all color, all races into the building to see him. He said, and they got behind him. I don't know if there's anybody else that could replicate and duplicate what JYD did, and me seeing it firsthand in that territory. He was so hot. You can't explain it to a fan nowadays who didn't see it. I don't even know in modern era who you could compare him to, how hot he was, because the comparison's not there. I don't know if there was anybody that could do it. I just think that void was such a hit to Bill Watts in Mid-South that there's nobody who could have, no one, the closest person that I saw, let me say this, because I wasn't into the tape trading like you. We didn't have a VCR, so even if I could get tapes, I couldn't watch it. So I don't know of the other territories and how hot maybe their talent was as far as anybody who could replace him. But Iceman to me would have been the only one that could have come close to it.
Interesting. So let me ask you two more parts of this question. One, would you say JYD in 1984 was as popular as he had been earlier in that territory?
Not really. But I think you're splitting hairs too. Because 88, remind me, Brian. 84. Okay. No, because what year did he go to WWF?
He went there in the summer of 84. 84 in Mid-South, I believe. Basically, he lost to Mr. Wrestling 2, lost the North American title of Mr. Wrestling 2. He was there as Stagger Lee.
That's right.
Where and Watts had the last stampede against the Midnight Express. So
I'm trying to put it. I'm trying to put it in the time period. He was. I mean, he wasn't as hot, but you're splitting hairs too with him, I think, because he was still JYD. I mean, he was, as they said down there, he was the dog. The Dog. I mean, his name was JYD, but obviously Joe. But they called him for short the Dog, and everyone knew who the Dog was, and the Dog was the man. I mean, the Dog was. It's hard to explain his charisma in that era. I mean, because I'm not saying anything that people don't know. He wasn't the greatest quote unquote wrestler, on the planet, but he had a way of getting people in that building, and they wanted to see the Dog howl and do his thing. And it's hard to explain to someone who did not witness it firsthand how good he was. But no, he wasn't as hot then, but it still was a major hit when he left.
Yeah.
Big time. And yes, I think Parsons is the only one who could have come close to maybe replacing him. Butch Reed wasn't bad. I don't have anything against him. There's no way he was going to replace JYD. It just wasn't going to happen.
It's interesting to hear you say that. It's nice.
Just
So many of
my
us.
perspective, seeing the territory firsthand, being there, watching it weekly as a kid, at that point between 5 and 9 years old, I just didn't see it.
See, that's what it is. So many of us who can opine about it after the fact, or having been distant from there and just seen tapes. But when you're actually someone who lived in the area and experienced it, you have a very unique perspective on it. You have, maybe the most accurate perspective of it.
I had, yeah, my perspective too is coming from that young kid point of view, 6 to 10 years old, who sees JYD the eruption that he would get from the doom, 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 another one. But that music would hit, and people would go bananas. They would just go nuts, just from his entrance. And you just can't duplicate it. It's hard to put it into words. And again, there's just not a talent out there. I thought there may have been someone that you could bring in, but it would have taken a lot of time to get them to the point that he was, because he was so hot.
Yeah.
And again, like One Man Gang was saying, he could get anybody into the building. And in that era, that was saying a lot. That, white, black, whatever, would get behind him and cheer him in the Deep South like that. So, yeah, that's a good question, though, Brian. That was a good question. I'd never really thought about it. I have thought about, what if he never left, but I had never thought of if there was anyone who could replace him.
Yeah, that's the thing. What if he hadn't left? I think a lot of the things that happened for other guys would have, it would have been him instead of the Snowman, probably, against Jake Roberts with Muhammad Ali in his corner in '85 in the Superdome.
Yeah.
For instance.
Yeah. Things would have, it's funny we're talking about this, because I know on this week's episode of your show, as we record this on June 17th, 2016, you guys talked about I guess I'll call it the domino effect of, Vince and the whole WCCW proposal with the merger with Fritz. And then you guys were talking about, well, what if Hogan, doesn't leave the AWA? It was a great discussion that you guys had, because man, it's so hard to really say what if, because we know what did happen. So it's hard to look back and go, well, what if it didn't happen this way? How things play out. So that begs the question. So if JYD doesn't leave and Ted DiBiase doesn't leave, then you have Watts when he does go national with UWF. Does that look different? And do they have success? But at the same time, my impression, and I've never talked to Watts, I don't know Watts. He seemed, from everything I've heard, and you maybe know more about this, be to the point where he was ready to get rid of it. So even if they stay and they're there, does he still sell to Crockett?
Well, it's tough to say, because again, not living there and only hearing things, it's hard for me to know exactly how the overall economy affected the business. Because obviously the economy took a hit, but I always wonder how much of that was just the economy, or how much of it was the economy and maybe the booking wasn't as good. Maybe the talent roster wasn't as good. And Bill Watts' territory was more decimated than any other territory by Japan, because you had Ted DiBiase regularly going to Japan, Terry Gordy regularly going to Japan, Steve Williams started going to Japan. So every few months, a guy had to either get injured or, just get banned for 60 days. Ted DiBiase had happened to a bunch of times. So that's true. So that was going on. And, again, so 84, Mid-South Wrestling has this amazing year, record-setting year, their best year ever, with the last stampede of Watts and Stagger Lee against the Midnight Express. Just this amazing stacked talent roster. Magnum TA and the Dog and the Rock and Roll Express and the Fantastics. People forget the PYT Express. And Buddy Landell and Butch Reed. And for every young guy coming up, you had veterans mixed in, used better than probably anyone else would have used them then. Wrestling 2. Sonny King shows up out of nowhere in the middle of the year. Ernie Ladd, whose knees were shot by that point.
Right.
So you have this good mix. And then by 85, Midnight Express, who have this amazing hot year, they're gone. They go to Dallas.
They're gone. Yep.
Rock and Roll Express, by early 85, they go to Crockett after their feud with the Guerreros.
Yep.
Fantastic's gone. Butch Reed was in it. I kind of remember he was in and out in 85. And then he was there I'm not sure. He was there at the end of the year, and by 86, he was gone. So by the time he turned into UWF, Butch Reed, who had been this major star as a babyface, major star as a heel, he's gone. There's no good black babyface once they go national with the UWF. DiBiase, like I said, he's in and out. I mean, think about it. End of 85, November of 85, they do the match with DiBiase versus Flair in the studio. Legendary match, maybe the greatest 1-hour episode of wrestling ever, where Dick Murdoch comes out, he wants the match. Ted DiBiase, who had been a heel, says no. Murdoch attacks him, bloodies him up, instantly turns DiBiase babyface. The fans instantly go with DiBiase against Flair. He loses. Murdoch gives him the brainbuster on the floor. DiBiase's injured, which of course was a guise for him going to Japan. And then he comes back in, I think, late December, and him and Murdoch have some matches. And then before you know it, Murdoch's gone. There's no televised payoff. Murdoch quits because Watts fires the Kaniskis, or was it just Kelly Kaniski? I'm not sure. But he fires at least Kelly Kaniski to make room for the Blade Runners of, Rock and Flash. Rock and Sting, I guess.
Rock and Sting.
So, there's a lot of talent. And then the whole Watts hires Ken Mantell, who brings over every single person that had been in world class, with the exception of the Von Erichs. He brings over everybody, and
that UWF roster was loaded with the world class talent.
Yeah, it was everyone that was in world class other than the Von Erichs.
Yeah, Adams came, Iceman came, the Fantastics came,
even Sunshine. I mean, all of a sudden,
Sunshine came. I remember that. I do remember that. But you're right. You're making a lot of solid points.
So I don't know. So I mean, look, the economy certainly had a big effect on it, but I also don't know how the talent roster and the booking affected it as well. And I always wonder things like, what if the Rock and Roll Express had stayed around another year? Would they have been able to maintain how hot they were? What if the Midnight Express had stayed around another year? Would they have been able to maintain their heat and elevate another babyface or a babyface tag team to be at that upper level? Because, look, there's a lot of questionable things in 85. Everything hits in 84. And 85's good. Don't get me wrong. It's still maybe the best wrestling program in 1985. But, Al Perez and Wendell Cooley are a tag team. And I don't know.
Yeah, I remember. You know what? I remember that. It's funny you say that because I remember that. And I remember as a kid when they won the tag belts, I was like,
yeah.
What makes, I remember thinking to myself, they're the tag champs. That something doesn't feel right about that.
Yeah. And then in 85, Terry Taylor leaves and he would come back. And, Terry Taylor was never used better and more effective than he was for Watts. So Terry Taylor's gone mid-year. The one thing I thought they built up really good in 85 was Jake Roberts turning babyface, because him and the Barbarian were a unit together. They were big heels. And when they finally started having confrontations with, I think they did some stuff with DiBiase and Dr. Death. And then it ended up with, I think the Barbarian turned and went with Skandar Akbar. There was a confrontation, I want to say Jake and Barbarian against Lord Humongous and someone, and I can't remember who. And the Barbarian turned on Jake. And I actually thought that Barbarian, if they had kept with that, him and Jake as a babyface group would have been something. But then Jake turns babyface, and again, here you go. So now it's the autumn of 85. Jake's a babyface. Duggan's there as a top babyface. DiBiase's about to turn. You have Buzz Sawyer. You have Dick Slater, who's booking. And by early 86, Dick Slater's gone. Jake Roberts is gone. All these guys that they've been building are just gone.
Yeah, you're right. They were more decimated. Yeah, as you say that, I hadn't even thought of the Japan part of it when you mentioned that.
Think about because Ric Flair did tours every now and then, but it wasn't regular. DiBiase was a regular. Once Bruiser Brody left All Japan, Stan Hansen picked Ted DiBiase to be his regular tag team partner. So all of a sudden, DiBiase's going over for every big tour to team with Stan Hansen. Dr. Death, who would go into the Wrestling Observer Hall of Fame based on his career in Japan, starts going over there. Terry Gordy was already a regular for All Japan, so he's going over there. So it's just, it affects you when, right there, I just named 3 of the top guys in 1986.
Yeah, there's only so much you can lose before you just start, it becomes just, I was going to say the just misfits, but it gets to the point where you take one, it's one thing. You start taking 1, 2, 3, 4, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, who's left? And then you maybe start pushing guys who aren't necessarily ready. You haven't had time to build them up.
Eli the Eliminator. Savannah Jack. There you go. 2 examples.
No, there you go. That's a great point. It was a fun territory. I I'm gonna have to search now the blinding angle because I had no clue that it was on there. But I'm gonna look that up, and I need to actually sit down. I want to go back now that I'm older and I haven't had time to do it and watch the TV episodes because I know they're out there
Yeah.
from 80 through 85, even the UWF stuff because I want to see it in sequence as an adult now, someone who can process it differently, and I want to see what my mind tells me as I'm watching it versus as when I was younger. But it definitely was. I've told people all the time. I feel like I was one of the luckiest kids on the planet. The fact that we got Mid South Wrestling on Saturday, and on Sunday we got World Class, because they televise that in New Orleans too. And seeing both of those, it was like I got 2 hours of wrestling as a kid, and it was just freaking fantastic. And to me, two of the the hottest territories that there were.
Absolutely.
And that's no disrespect to the others that were out there, because I hear a lot of good things about Portland. I just never was exposed to it.
Yeah, no, but
Um,
look, in that time period, 1983 World Class, you could say, was the hottest promotion in America. I mean, look, AWA was doing record business. WWF was doing great business. Mid-Atlantic was doing great business, but World
Right.
Class elevated things to a different level in terms of production, in terms of a female demographic coming out and screaming for every single match, and just
Good
a
God,
hot
yes.
young roster. I mean, it was a roster of young people, which was not a very common thing, everywhere. Usually there was some veterans on top. World Class, it was all the young guys on top. So, yeah,
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah. You know what's funny? You were talking on your show this week, 605 podcast, about
Super podcast.
the whole. So I'm sorry, Super Podcast. Which, by the way, I got to keep plugging it, and I've mentioned it a few times on my show because it's so good. Before I ask this question, I just want to say, following some of your, not your personally in 605 Super Podcast personally, but following some of these parody accounts, these guys are fucking nuts. I don't know who's manning the controls on some of these dudes, but Jesus, they're bringing it to a new level. Let's just say that. So it's kind of funny, man. That's a part of the show that's not really a part of the show that is. Is that a fair way of
I
saying
feel
it?
like there's an entire community with the show. The show itself is this. You say it's different than other podcasts. I take that as the highest compliment there is because I don't want to be another podcast. There are so many podcasts with just people, two friends sitting down and talking about something, or an old wrestler interviewing someone. I'm looking to do drive time radio. I mean, as crazy as that sounds in a podcast forum or format, I'm looking to do a 4-hour show that's like, a Howard Stern show for wrestling. You can listen to it in your car on your commute, and it has different segments and characters and comedy and information.
Mhm.
And that's what we've been doing. So, throughout the show, and it's a series that I feel like when people get into it, they always say, where should I start? I go, start at the beginning, because then you get all the inside jokes and you get to understand how all the characters evolved. I started doing characters. Episode 2, I started doing the Black Scorpion.
You're
I
right.
started doing all these different things, and we keep introducing people. And then all of a sudden, the first one that popped up that I remember was the Yo Mamba the Jungle Savage Twitter feed. And he was great because he would just like threaten to eat people's wives and eat people's feet. I mean, it was really, really funny stuff. And while that was going on, I built up the Facebook community. So, it was like we were hitting on all these different platforms. And then the Twitter thing just exploded. I think Denim Fritz is probably the biggest one, which is, again, a minor thing I mentioned on the air that I find it funny that at the Parade of Champions in May of 1984, when it's going to be this big grudge match, this bad street match between the Freebirds and
Right.
the Von Erichs, that Fritz Von Erich's response was, get me the denim. And all of a sudden he's wearing denim. I mean, you never saw him dressed like that. So I made that little joke on the air, and my co-host David Bixenspan didn't see the humor in it. And he was debating me about whether it was denim or not. And I just kept with it. And the listeners, as I knew they would, jumped on it. And all of a sudden there's a Denim Fritz page. And it went from just being about his love of denim to being about, like, Denim Fritz, the character, watches the same shows my grandmother did. He talks about his love of Murder, She Wrote and Matlock. And it's just gotten ridiculous. And then these other things. We talked about the fake Stan Lane, the guy who died and pretended he was
Right.
Stan Lane to his wife who believed him for 20 years. All of a sudden there's a fake Stan Lane Twitter account, and he's feuding with the Twitter page of the Eye of Gibson, a Twitter account for Robert Gibson's Lazy Eye. So I mean,
I saw that.
you have like all this stuff going on, and it's great. And it's every now and then someone steps a little too far, and I send them a message. I say, hey, chill, and they're always respectful. They say they don't want to do anything to hurt the show. They love the show. That's why they're doing it. But it's fun. It's a way for people to take characters and, in the spirit of the show, have fun with it on Twitter. And Jim Cornette said it to me. He's like, I keep getting these messages from Twitter, from Denim Fritz von Erich. I said, "Yep, you're welcome."
Oh,
I don't know who anyone is other than I was in touch with Denim Fritz. I don't know who it is, but we had a nice conversation on Twitter where I just said, make sure you stay away from the family tragedies and everything. But I have no idea who any of these people are. They're awesome listeners who jumped on it, and I applaud them.
Well, I've followed from my podcast page. I went ahead and followed Denim Fritz, and I think Fake Stan Lane and the Gibson guy. There's a Ricky Morton that him and Gibson, the stuff they put out there is ridiculously stupid. It's fun. I find it funny because they talk about rats and they're and Morton, the Morton guy, I saw it yesterday. He's got one out there and he says rat lives matter. No, all rats matter. I'm like, Jesus, where do you come up with this stuff? So and then him and Gibson are going back and forth about their van. Oh, it's just and then Denim Fritz with putting the Gino sugar in his coffee. I'm like, oh God, this is
that. And the other thing he jumped on, which has become this funny thing, was it just kind of mildly started and now it's all the time, is this idea that Branko Lubitsch is regularly found naked or like locking himself in his car. Just he just like jumped on this thing and it's become this funny running joke of just like, crazy Branko Lubitsch.
It's insane. It's really insane, and honestly, to me it helps the show, like you said, unless they go too far with it, which I can completely understand your point on that because what will end up happening is people will look at you guys as the ones who maybe are festering it, so to say, and when that's actually
that's exactly what happened. One account, I won't say who, made some comments that were too far, and I hadn't seen it until a couple of people wrote to me that they were offended, and I went and I looked. And the first problem was people thought it was me and Bix. And we're not any of these accounts. Trust me. I'm busy enough.
Right.
I got to do the video playlist in a few minutes. I'm busy enough with this show. I don't have time to run these parody accounts. And I know Bix isn't doing it either. So people thought it was us. And right away I was like, I don't want that. And then the other thing was, it was something that I thought was inappropriate. And like I said, I have found so far that when I touch base with any of these people, when I send them a direct message, the last thing they want to do is hurt the show. It's the opposite. They're doing this because they love the show.
Right.
So everyone's cool.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. That's good. But I just find it. I had to bring it up because it's funny. The characters. I don't know how it's determined. I guess I'll call them characters. The Twitter folks
Super universe. We call
it. Super universe. There you go. Hey, you were talking about the Vince and WCCW proposed merger. With Fritz, and one thing you said in relation to that was how Vince, it seemed to he didn't touch the talent in World Class, and the only talent that I actually looked back after listening to you and Bix about that part. The only thing I could find, the only person he took, and I don't even know if you can attribute them to World Class completely because he was in Mid-South, was One Man Gang.
Yeah, you can't do that because he went from UWF to Vince.
Right. So that was the closest I could find to someone who Vince maybe would have taken from World Class. But I just found that discussion interesting to know, what if that proposed merger that has so been talked about, what if that does happen? Because World Class had hit a peak at that, 83 time period, 84. Man, does the wrestling world look different? Or I'm gonna throw this one at you too. With the advent of cable, with the territories, they were probably gonna die anyway. So is it just that Vince just happened to be the guy who gets the blame for killing it? It was gonna end up being someone. He's just the person who did it. I mean, I'm asking you a couple of different things, but it just makes you wonder, how different do things play out? Are we watching WCCW entertainment? Or are we watching World Class Championship entertainment instead of World Wrestling Entertainment now? You know what I mean? I guess it's a confusing thing, but it's funny it's fun to maybe sit back and look at it and go, how do things play out differently if that merger happens?
Well, cable television was happening no matter what.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, TBS had wrestling on there from ever since it was WTCG. They've had wrestling on there. Before it was a Superstation, TBS, when it was just WTBS. They had wrestling on there. And Terry Funk tells the story that he knew it was time to sell the Amarillo territory when he was at some show and some fan came up to him and started asking about when is Tommy Rich coming in? And Terry was a little surprised, like, how do you know about Tommy Rich? And they said, we see it on the cable. And Terry realized that, okay, everything's about to change, because if they could see these other companies, that, you know, they're going to see all this other stuff, it's going to hurt us. And
now, what year was that?
Oh, geez. That may have, when did he sell? Because I think that was when he sold to Murdoch and Mulligan. That may have been 70, somewhere between 78 and 80. I should know off the top of my head.
Wow. That's early, though. I mean, that's...
But Terry Funk is notorious for many years, he was on top of every single trend that happened. And a lot of that was because he was one of the more well-traveled wrestlers. He regularly was going to Japan from, you know, the early 70s on. So he got to see a lot of trends before they hit America. And Dave Meltzer from the Wrestling Observer has always talked about that. Terry Funk was one of the sharpest guys because he could see where things were going. He could understand patterns and how things were going. So like I said, cable television, no matter what, was going to happen. Now, could it have happened so that several promotions could have existed or coexisted on cable at the same time? You know, yes, I think it could have, but Vince...
Well, it did. It happened. It actually did happen.
It happened, but my point is, WCW. Could it have happened if there was a cooperative where it wasn't Vince McMahon just actively raiding and trying to put out of business every other company? Because AWA, which he went after with Venom, he went after the AWA harder than anyone.
Yeah.
Over and over and over again. I mean, to the point where it was ridiculous. But, you know, they get on ESPN. Crockett gets on TBS. Various other wrestling shows pop up. You know, eventually World Class would end up on ESPN as well. Continental out of Alabama in '88 was on the Financial News Network. You know, various things popped up all over the place. And you had Vince McMahon attacking them and trying as hard as he could to attack them, to hurt, you know, when Crockett Promotions decided to start doing pay-per-views, Vince threatened the cable companies. He said, if you carry Starrcade 87, you will not get WrestleMania 4. And I believe every single cable company in the country, with the exception of a handful, didn't carry it. They took Survivor Series instead because they didn't want to piss off Vince McMahon. And of course, the ones who did take Starrcade, they still got WrestleMania. Vince wasn't going to say no to them. And, you know, that happens. That leads to Crockett. And then Crockett did a second pay-per-view in January of '88 called the Bunkhouse Stampede, and Vince ran a free Royal Rumble on USA Network against it, the first Royal Rumble. So then Crockett fired back with Clash of the Champions 1, which ran against WrestleMania 4. And the cable companies begged, you know, Ted Turner to not allow this to happen on his airwaves again against what was going to be their big cash cow, this WrestleMania pay-per-view, because it was what was pay-per-view. It was boxing, and it was wrestling, and then it was just movies. So it was a big thing, maybe some porn here and there. And then Vince McMahon gets into this big dispute with the cable companies, and he's threatening to, you know, leave pay-per-view, and he's telling people to write into their cable companies. And for '89, they ask Turner Home Entertainment or TBS, I forget what division they would have asked, to run against WrestleMania. And that's how you had Clash of the Champions, Flair versus Steamboat against WrestleMania 5. So like I said, cable television was going to happen. I think if they promoters had been able to get along, and I think for the most part they all would have in one way or another, other than Vince, then maybe they could have all coexisted in the cable universe. But you know, even Ole Anderson was pissing people off in '83 because he was expanding. Georgia Championship Wrestling became World Championship Wrestling. They started going to Ohio. They started going to Michigan. They started, you know, getting very, very close to Vince McMahon Sr., or actually at '83 would have been Vince McMahon Jr. already. They were getting very, very close to those towns. So there were definitely conflicts that would have arisen no matter what due to cable television. But there's also a way that guys could have coexisted and not just tried to put other companies out of business.
Yeah, that's true too. It like you said, it would have taken a little bit of cooperation. And it still kind of almost would have been territory-like. It just would have been much bigger territories. Because if I'm listening to the way that you're explaining it, let's say Vince, this is just for the sake of the discussion, Vince and Vern and Crockett go, you know what, we can coexist, but instead of just like you have this little small territory like Watts had with Louisiana, Mississippi, uh, it's just mid-South. It will be a territory. Well, we won't be a territory, but we will commit to only staying in this particular area, and maybe it's from Louisiana or Texas, Louisiana, all the way to the East Coast, and then Vern has Minnesota all the way to the West Coast, and Vince has the Northeast. You still would have had you would have needed some form of cooperation. It would have been bigger territories, I guess, is the way I'm looking at it, but that would have been the cooperation, and I guess like you said, cable was going to happen. You weren't going to stop it. It changed the industry. It changed things completely because you had programs. I mean, I remember getting I think I remember the first time I saw WWE was maybe 85, 84, 85 in New Orleans when Vince started giving his tapes to the stations, and not giving, you know what I mean, where we could catch.
Oh, he was buying those times.
Buying, yeah, I'm saying giving, but it was bound to happen, but very interesting. I've always wondered, if it was going to happen the way it was going to happen, and there's nothing that could do to stop it. You make a good point about you would have had to have some form of cooperation for it to somewhat survive, where you'd have more than one. And I mean, we saw it a little bit with world class WCW and WWE, WWF at the time, they both had national promotions, obviously, and into the cable era, but they were still trying to put each other out of business at the same time.
That's the thing. I mean, if WCW hadn't been booked into the ground, they could have survived. They could have existed today, and you would have had two different brands as opposed to just the WWE and a bunch of smaller companies. You could have had that. And WCW Eric Bischoff took pages out of the Vince McMahon playbook. He started going after his talent. He didn't raid them. Yeah. He didn't get them. Well, I shouldn't say that altogether. But, Vince McMahon, he had the Junkyard Dog walk out of Mid-South Wrestling with no notice. He had Hulk Hogan leave AWA, right before their big Christmas shows. He no-showed every single one of those Christmas shows. He did things that deliberately hurt the other territories. WCW, look, they signed Hall and Nash, but, Luger showed up unannounced on TV. WWE, didn't realize that would happen. Medusa, they had let go of, so it's not like she really screwed them, although she had the belt with her.
Yeah, the infamous drop it in the trash.
But by this point in time, there's contracts, so it's not like people could just walk out and show up on another show the next day without violating their contract.
Yeah,
there were no contracts in the Mid-South Wrestling days.
Right. Yeah, it was. You were supposed to give your notice and give X amount of weeks, but at the same time, that was more of a handshake type thing. That was not a formal contract. Here it is. You can't do X, Y, and Z until this point. It was just different
contracts
time.
Really came into play in like '86, I would say. That's when Watts went to the UWF and tried to go national. That's when Crockett brought in the Road Warriors. I mean, that's when contracts really became a big thing for everyone other than Vince. Vince started doing contracts right away in '84.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, quick question. I know we're you good on time?
I'm good on time right now. Yeah.
Okay, good. I just wanted to double check, man, because I appreciate your time. So one thing that we can't buy and can't get more of. So, let me, you know it. And I can tell just from listening to the 605 Super Podcast, you guys put a lot of time into it.
It's become a full-time thing for me. Absolutely.
I can believe it. I 100% believe it. So I met I hadn't told you this obviously yet. I worked the indies mid 90s through early 2000s. And I actually had an opportunity on a show in New Orleans to work with a guy named Gentleman Chris Adams when I was very, very young. Let me tell you a little bit about Adams because I know you've talked about him on your show. He beat the shit out of me. But it was all right. I mean, I was green. James Beard told me, yeah, that's what Chris does to green guys. So anyway, long story short, the reason I bring Chris up is because you and Bix were talking about Chris on an episode of the 605 Super Podcast a couple weeks back, I think, maybe 2 weeks ago. I'm not sure. And how, in the mid 90s when WCW was making their move with Nitro and whatnot, it's funny, Chris was still in decent shape. I mean, he was still a really, really good talent. But it's funny how even then and even in the mid 80s, after the World Class Championship Wrestling, situation kind of died down and it wasn't as hot, and even into the early 90s, nobody really gave Chris another chance. I wanted you to talk about that because you and Bix had some interesting discussion about the fact that, Chris still was a very talented individual. I personally saw him a couple of times in a club when Chris got to drinking, and I'm not speaking bad on him because I know he's deceased now. Chris turned into a different person. Um, and I'm just wondering, like, I don't know if you had any experiences with Chris or ever got to meet him or anything.
I didn't.
Okay, he's a very complex guy. Just a couple times I was around him, and I was on a few different cards with him, more than a handful. Let me say that on the Indies, and he just was just a different guy. He was nice. Don't get me wrong. He wasn't evil or anything. As I say all this, I don't want people to get the wrong impression. But he would get to drinking and he would turn into this different guy. And I'm wondering, just James Beard talks about him in his book how he was just complicated. I think was the term he used. Um, your opinion of Chris in the early '90s, even mid '90s, even when WCW was starting to take off, with the money right before the Monday Night Wars, why Chris just didn't get an opportunity?
He was unreliable.
There you go.
I mean, that's
Okay.
really the key word. And I'm a big Chris Adams fan. I'm a big Chris Adams fan. Everyone, I shouldn't say everyone. I feel like the tide has turned. So many people focus on Von Erichs versus Freebirds, which I'm not saying anything bad about. I mean, it's spectacular. It's perfect wrestling. But to me, I love Von Erichs versus Dynamic Duo because I think Chris Adams was just a great babyface. And by the way, his super kick is the best super kick to this day I've ever seen in wrestling.
Let me tell you something real quick before you keep going. I took it. I took it, and I was told by another indie guy. I don't say his name because no one knows who he is anyway. Make sure you turn. Just make sure you turn. Make sure you turn and make sure that sucker hits you in the side of your neck where you can take it. When he hit me with it, thank God I timed it perfectly. But I've seen him deliver it to a couple of guys and they weren't. Let's say it was almost lights out. But to your point, Brian, greatest super kick I've ever seen.
It was the most dynamic to this day. It's the most dynamic one. And he didn't do any of that stupid shit where you stand in the corner and you stomp your boot. He would stand in the middle of the ring and you would see him setting up and it was just lightning fast and it was the best one ever. I love it. I can watch tapes of him doing super kicks all day.
He had that hitch like almost right before he delivered it. And then when he delivered it, even if it didn't, nail the guy, it always looked like it just freaking
it was
nailed
devastating.
The guy.
It was
It was unreal. Yeah. And it was a finishing move back then. Imagine that.
Yeah, I mean, it was the best. It was the best. It used to drive me crazy in like the mid '90s when Shawn Michaels all of a sudden started using the super kick as his finishing maneuver. And I was like, man, that sucks. Like his super kick sucks. And I can understand why people can see it and be like, oh, it's great. Now, have you seen Chris Adams? Every other super kick is just like done by an old lady. Like it just doesn't have the same effect. But anyway,
it does.
Big Chris Adams fan. I think he's great, and I think when he turns heel, he's awesome as a heel. I love that Cotton Bowl match from '84 against Kevin.
Oh God, yes. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I mean, not even just the match. The match is great, and the post match is great. But just when he gets on the mic and starts yelling at Kevin Von Erich as a heel, he's so fucking cool. And I love him there. And of course, Gino dies in February of '86, right after they shot the angle that turned Chris back babyface. And then he goes to the UWF. And around this time was when he went to jail for, we joked on the show. We said he super kicked a stewardess. He assaulted a stewardess on a plane where I believe Kevin Von Erich was with him and tried to get him to cool down, and he just wouldn't. And if I'm wrong about that, that means there was a second occurrence on a plane that Kevin Von Erich did cool him down. But he had a temper, and he couldn't handle his drink, and it's well known. We're not speaking out of turn by saying that, even though he's passed away.
I saw it firsthand.
Yeah, I've never heard anyone
with my own eyes.
I've never heard anyone say the opposite, and I'm actually in the middle right now of reading Jeannie Clark, his ex-wife's book, so we can review it on 605. And he couldn't handle his drinking, and it made him unreliable because, especially in the 80s and early 90s. Wrestlers wrestled and then they partied. They wrestled and then they drank or they did whatever. That was just, it was the lifestyle. It was the lifestyle.
They didn't play video games like they do now.
No, I mean, who didn't do that stuff? Bruno Sammartino. I mean, that was it. Everyone else was partying. It was a party culture. It was a party era. Cocaine aplenty.
Yes.
I mean, especially in Dallas. So he was unreliable. And, Bix brought it up on the show, my co-host, when they did Starrcade 90, the tag team tournament, the Pat O'Connor Cup, I believe it was. And Chris Adams was one of the guys. It was Chris Adams and Norman Smiley. He got a big pop. People remembered him. He is one of the more recognizable guys from World Class from that era.
Most def. Yeah, most
And
definitely.
then nothing. And then he was still working Texas indie shows. He was still working, the stuff with Steve Austin in Texas. And then after that, it's like, he's in and out. Every now and then he would appear somewhere. He was for a brief while in 93. He was in Memphis with Brian Christopher and his other ex-wife, Tony Adams.
Mhm.
And then nothing. He was an underneath guy for Nitro or for WCW, when Nitro took off and they had the biggest roster in the history of wrestling.
God, did they?
But that was it. And again, if he had been able to keep himself in check, I think he could have been a major star, because as a babyface, he was like fucking Paul McCartney. He's a nice British guy, perfect little gentleman. Chris Adams was perfect. It was believable.
Oh, it was. Do you remember when they did the deal where he had the what was his name? They put him under a hood and
Jimmy Garvin.
Do you remember that reaction from that crowd? I mean, it was just it's insane.
But I mean, that shows you too what a great babyface he was. He didn't just remove the mask and stand there. He removed the mask and his emotion got the crowd going even more. I mean, he was effective. He was a great effective babyface. And then he was an amazing heel. He did both roles perfectly, to perfection.
He did. Do you know who Rod Price is?
That's the guy who Chris Adams ripped his hair plugs out of his head.
Okay, yeah. Well, Rod is a very good friend of mine. Yes, Rod is one of the best dudes you'll ever talk to.
Rumored to be one of the Slip House boys.
I haven't heard that one, but no. The hairpiece story is a fact. I've actually got it on the podcast. It's on my show at one point. He told the story. 200 and something stitches. He basically was scalped completely. Yeah. So anyway, long story short, Rod's told me plenty of Chris stories, and just Chris he's exactly what you've explained. He was a top talent, great talent. Just he couldn't keep it under control. And I don't know if I've ever seen someone who got a drink in them or two and the light switch would flip like it would flip with
Chris. It's crazy because I like a good drink. Usually the day one of my shows comes out, after it drops at midnight, I go downstairs and I sit at my dining room table and I'll drink some vodka or I'll drink some scotch, whatever I have, and I'll just sit back, relax, have a drink, and do some reading. And and I'm fine. And I've been in the music business. I've been around a lot of people drinking, and you don't see that very often. But every now and then, there's those guys who it just takes one beer. I mean, it's the craziest thing. One beer, and I don't mean like one beer, and they have because there are people who have like one drink and it sets them off where they develop they can develop a substance abuse problem very quickly. It wasn't about that as much as it was about anger that would come out of him.
We were in a bar / club after a indie show. This is probably 96, 95, 96 or sometime like that. And he was fine. He walked to we were all there. There's being a bunch of the other indie guys and him. I want to say Iceman might have been at this event too. He got I think he drank one or two drinks. Some guy walked past him, and I don't know if he just looked at Chris wrong or what, but Chris started going off and I'm like, holy shit, what's going on? I look over, I'm a 21-year-old kid at this point, I'm like, what the hell's going on? And the promoter, he knew Chris relatively well. I mean, he had booked him a bunch of times on indie shows that he had, and he grabs him and they're fighting to get him out the club, and three other guys are pulling him, and Chris is like an animal trying to get away so he can super kick this guy and screaming and yelling, and it was just insane. I remember asking Rod about it, like, man, have you ever seen him act like that? Because Rod wasn't there that night. He goes, more than you can imagine. It's like a demon inside of him. James Beard, like I said, he said he was just complicated. That was the way he put it.
I've been meaning to get his book, actually, James Beard.
I have a copy of it. It's a very good book. It's not like a dirt book, so to say, where throwing people under the bus. He's got some good little stories in there, man. You'd enjoy reading it. He's actually coming out with a second one soon from his time in
Oh,
Japan.
cool.
Yeah, but the one he's got now with the Life and Times of Third Man or something like that, you'd enjoy it, and it's a pretty good read. He's got some sections in there where he talks about Akbar and Gary Hart, talks about Rod Price, he's got chapters on Chris Adams. Interesting, very good book. I enjoy reading it because it covers that time of when he got into world class and then global, which how much do you remember about
Oh, I used to
global?
watch it every day. I would rush home from school. It'll be on ESPN at 4 p.m. every single day.
Because that's what I wanted to ask you about global, because I was watching this the network has put some global stuff up, and they got this best of the USWA GWF
Yeah.
on. There's a match on the first one from May 3rd of '92. It's with Eddie Gilbert and Jeff Jarrett. They work 15 minutes. I swear there's not really a high spot in it, and the crowd is going absolutely nuts the entire time.
Yeah.
And it's just reminded me of the good days of wrestling. And this is in the '90s, so it wasn't dead at that point. The territories were slowly going away, but just really good stuff, man. So James and I were actually talking about that at one point. He didn't have that in the book, but if you haven't seen that match, check it out, and definitely check out
No,
the
it's a
book.
great match. I definitely have seen it, and it's good stuff. It's just I just wish WWE would upload more of this stuff to their network, because I really don't need to see any of their current stuff. I just want to see all this old stuff. And even going back to Mid-South, they've uploaded a few Mid-South episodes here and there. And the problem is they don't have local promos. That's why tape trading is still effective, like for people who get it,
Yes.
because I want Reeser Bowden sitting there talking to Jim Cornette.
Right. I do too. I'm glad you said that. I want them to load. I don't understand why they don't do it. Just load it, because I want to see it chronologically. I want to watch that stuff again. I want to see it all. I want to see it all play out. I want to see the angles of storylines. I want to see, like you said, the promos. I want to see it all, because that's what made it good. The way they have it loaded now, you get bits and pieces of it. It doesn't tell the
Yeah,
whole
it's
story.
episodic TV. Bill Watts was better than probably anyone when it came to putting out episodic TV that made sense. Everything to the most minute detail had to make sense and go from week to week to week. So when you drop an episode from 84, one from 85, one from 83, it doesn't do it any justice at all.
No, it's like I don't know if there's a show on Netflix I'm watching right now called Heroes. Obviously, a lot of people have heard of it. Heroes. If I watch episode 1 and then go watch season 2, episode
Right.
1, it's not going to mean anything to me, because I don't have that episodic, thing going on with the way TV works. Another thing that they used to do too with Mid-South and many of the territories, I used to always love how at the very end of the show, the shit was hitting the fan and they're going off air.
Yeah, when they became UWF, it was like every single episode was like, wait a minute, why are they starting a match with 2 minutes left in the show? It was just so Jim Ross can yell, "We're out of time!"
Be back next Saturday, same time, same place, everybody. And they're going off
But they
air.
never showed you, like, oh, by the way, last week, you may remember there was all this fucking chaos on the show. We just want to show you how it ended. It was never like we want to return to what you missed last week. It was always they started off calm and brand new.
I mean, I'll ask you a question as we're wrapping up. Do you even watch the current product at all?
I try to give everything a chance. I'm not a big WWE fan for obvious reasons, I think, but I give it a chance. Especially when baseball season's on. Unless the Mets are off on a Monday, I'm not watching wrestling. But I'll usually during the year I'll tune into Raw and I'll give it a few minutes, and if they hook me, I'll stay. If they don't, I won't. And usually they don't. I mean, there's just so much shit. The show's too long. The booking, there is no booking. The writing is terrible. The writing wrestling with a script is a bad idea, and it doesn't work, and it's not conducive to producing good entertainment. Everyone is so scripted. Everyone has the same cadence. I'd rather have guys kicking the shit out of each other than guys doing cool spots, and I'd rather have guys kicking the shit out of each other and every now and then throwing in a cool spot, because then it's more effective. It's just, I'm not crazy about it, but I give it a chance. I watch WrestleMania every year. I do that with, my wife and kids, and we watch it together as a thing. And usually they tap out at different points, and I end up just sitting there alone with a bucket of popcorn watching it. And then Ring of Honor, I appreciate what they've done, and I've done business at Ring of Honor in the past, but it's not my favorite thing right now. I don't know. There's something I've kind of lost it for that.
I can tell you what their biggest problem is. They miss the boat on this episodic television part. And I'm a big Ring of Honor fan. I like the guys that they've had. I've had a couple of their guys on my show, and I really really do like what they do. The talent they have is good,
They have
but
good talent,
they
absolutely.
they're the way they put their TV program together. It's not episodic, and that's what I don't. That's the part that I don't
Yeah, and
like.
you know the other thing too is, I like New Japan, although this year I've kind of burned out on it just because Nakamura's gone and AJ Styles is gone and now Kota Ibushi's gone. But I'm sick of the Bullet Club. To me, it was always kind of lame. Just I don't know. I guess because I grew up in the '90s. Like I was a teenager in the '90s. I remember how lame I thought the NWO like Wolf hand signal was and the crotch chops. And now here are all these guys doing someone else's shtick all these years later. To me, it's like the epitome of lame. So I'm not a big Bullet Club fan. And now Ring of Honor is just inundated with like, the third tier Bullet Club. Not even like the guys who were the Bullet Club. It's like the guys who, it's like NWO Red or whatever, taking over a company. So I'm not big on that. Like I said, I like New Japan. I'll check out stuff if I hear someone say, go out of your way to see something from Mexico and Japan, I usually will try to. I will say probably my favorite thing right now is NXT. I think NXT is great because you know what? Even when there's squash matches and there's nothing exciting on the show, it's episodic, it builds. And every single time it builds to one of those takeover specials, it's great. And I've enjoyed every one of those takeover specials, like immensely.
It's unreal. It's funny you bring it up because I've heard you mention the NXT stuff with Cornette on the Cornette experience, Jim Cornette experience, and it's 1 hour, and then you got the specials that they build to, which aren't every month, and then the specials are only 2 hours, and just look what they've done. It actually hurts me that when some of the talent leaves there, they just they get lost. That pisses me off more than anything. But NXT won me over with Sasha Banks almost by themselves, and she's not the only one, but because like American Alpha, I mean those two guys.
I'll tell you,
oh God,
I love American Alpha. I think they're great, but I've started to realize the Revival don't get enough credit because they are a team that, from what I've heard about them, grew up and to this day still watch tapes and love like old Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express matches, and
I believe
that's what I love. Honestly, I love, my favorite thing in wrestling may be like a good tag team match. A good paced tag team match, not with a bunch of stupid spots, and no one's selling anything, and just I don't want that. I want a match with back and forth and hot tags, and they had that match a few months back, WrestleMania, which was great, and then they had one a few weeks ago on Takeover, which was extraordinary. God. I'm actually going to go out of my way to make sure Jimmy watches it for the show because everyone thinks, oh, he hates current wrestling, he hates it. I mean, he hates the shit that he thinks is stupid.
He does. Yeah, he gets a bad rap with that. Look, I met him at the NWA Parade of Champions. Rod introduced me to him. Rod Price introduced me to him, and he mentioned that he's like, everybody thinks I hate the current wrestling. He's like, if I hated current wrestling, what am I doing here? I mean, he doesn't. I get that impression too, that everybody thinks he hates it. He doesn't hate it. He's voicing his opinion. What do you expect him to do? I mean,
he likes good stuff. I mean, like I would say for me, and this is my taste. I'm not saying everyone needs my taste, but I enjoyed the 2 American Alpha Revival matches more than I have any Young Bucks match. Nothing to take. I'm not taking anything away from what they do and the people who like them and buy their shirts, but it's my taste. Like, yeah,
it's your opinion.
And it's
I agree
2 different kinds of wrestling, and this is the kind of wrestling I enjoy. Is like the American Alpha Revival series of matches, and Jim's the same way. It's not about how many flips you can do or how many super kicks you can deliver in a few minutes or anything. It's about telling a story and building a match. And I'm a Jewish kid from New York who loved Mid-South wrestling. What kind of wrestling you think I'm going to like? It's going to be a good tag team match like a Revival versus American Alpha.
You're right. You hit a key too with the Revival. They are. I've heard people talk about them like they don't like them because they're like, oh, they're kind of plain, but they are that old school tag team, and I actually love what they just did because they got the belts back. So it was like the 2 favorites, the 2 babies. They won. They finally got their comeuppance. They win the belts, and then what happens at the next special? They lose them. Yeah. It has that little angle that they're doing. It's got that old school Mid-South feel to me. of it.
Yeah, and I think American Alpha are definitely going to get called up sooner rather than later, especially with the brand extension that they're doing with SmackDown now. And like you kind of briefly mentioned earlier, it scares me when someone I care about and have enjoyed watching in NXT gets brought up to the roster, because I know they'll be misused or jobbed out or not used correctly or given a bad script or in short matches or in matches that don't make sense. Like, I have no faith in. I'm dreading the day Vince McMahon gets his hands on Nakamura. Like, I'm just not into that. But I don't know if the Revival are going to get called up so quickly. And that gives me hope that maybe they can kind of be this anchor for the NXT tag team division.
I agree. They scare me when they bring people up, and I'm going to cite two people. Well, one, Apollo Crews. I like the guy. The way they brought him up. Why do people want him? Why do people want to get behind him? He's a good talent, but I mean, they brought him up, and she's just there. It's just bland. Sasha, they've done all right with her. I'm the biggest Sasha Banks fan.
Has she been on TV in the last 2 months?
No, but let me tell you my opinion on that. I'm okay with that, actually, because I would rather they not overexpose the people, their talent. And the bottom line is she's about to be on TV a lot with the brand split.
Yeah.
So she hasn't been on. Now, there was a concussion in between that time period too, because she did get a concussion. She took a knee to the head or a blow to the head at one point on the house show. So that kind of put her on, not a sidelines, but there was a couple of weeks where I don't think she was working. I could be wrong, but I seem to remember reading that report, and it was a legit report. So, no, you good points, man. NXT some solid stuff, and let's hope with the split, because I do watch it weekly. It's very tough to make it through, Brian. It really is. 3 hours of Monday Night Raw is. It's painful at times.
No,
thankfully there's DVR.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm as big a wrestling fan as anyone. Look, I started a podcast because I love wrestling, and I do it for 4 hours a week. I mean, I love wrestling, and I can't do Raw. It's just I want to like current wrestling, but it's just you can't insult me. And it goes back to what we said. Bill Watts presented a credible, realistic product that didn't insult the audience. And when I watch Raw, I got announcers who I hate who have to press mute because they're yelling at me. They're talking to me like I'm a child. I have guys in the ring doing promos like they're children, talking to me like I'm a child. It's just, I think there is a market if you present it like it's legitimate. I'm not saying, everyone has to be, like a collegiate wrestler or anything, but present it like it's real. At least pretend it's real so that the audience can lose themselves in it.
Yeah,
as opposed to, even now, every now and then they'll do something good. It'll be like, oh man, that was great. A great match or a great angle. And then I tuned in the other day and it was something I liked. And then it was followed by Gold Dust and R-Truth and Fandango. I was like, what is this shit? That's the hashtag people should use when Raw is on. What is this shit?
I think there's a similar one out there.
Oh, okay.
There's one. I don't know if it's what is this shit. There's one is who booked this shit.
Okay, well, yeah, that works. That works too.
Yeah. So there's a few of them out there. Hey, Brian, man, you've given me a lot of your time, man. I really appreciate it. Go ahead and as we wrap up, man, I want you to go ahead and plug everything with the 605 Super Podcast, the Twitter, the Facebook, anything else, because you guys are doing some good business with the 605 Super Podcast. So I wanted you to get your plugs in while you're on my show.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate it. I'm happy to be here on Booking the Territory. I'm glad you didn't ask me to book the Kansas City territory. While I was here, I would have walked off the show in about 2 minutes.
No, we're not booking that. I've heard too much bad stuff about that territory. Sam Houston has told me personally how bad that territory was in his experiences there.
The worst. But anyway,
yes.
My show is the 605 Super Podcast, the only podcast on Turner Time. It is a weekly show, comes out every Thursday, and it's a long show, and we have different segments. It's more, like I said earlier, a drive time radio show than a typical wrestling podcast. We do lots of humor, and we have lots of information. We have interviews every show, not just interviews with people like Jim Cornette, but interviews with people you may not know or may have only briefly heard of, who have interesting perspectives and have been involved in interesting things. We're currently running a series of interviews with Polish Joe Chupik. You may not know that name. Polish Joe was the AWA producer from 1985 to 1991. So we're getting all these stories about the inner workings of the AWA. It was a very small office, a very short staff. And Joe was in the middle of it. So we get to hear about the Team Challenge series, about the deal with ESPN, about the attempt to work with Hogan again with WGN TV. All of these things. We're touching on things that other podcasts really aren't doing. So we have that.
Mm-hmm.
And then we cover cult wrestling favorites. If there are people who you may never have heard of, we talk about. We built up Mark Aline for months. We played the interviews of Mark Aline, who was a manager in Memphis for 2 months in late 87 and early 88. And he did these amazing promos, and then he was gone, and he came back later on as a different character. We played these promos. We built him up. We played the sound bites. We finally got him on the show for an amazing interview, and everyone's gone crazy for it. So we do things like that. I mean, there's no other podcast talking about Wild Bull Curry currently, and we are 605 Super Podcast. And you could follow us at 605pod.com. We're also on iTunes, on Stitcher. I believe if you're someone who steals files from a torrent site, we're on the 2 biggest wrestling torrent sites currently. So feel free to steal our show, even though it's free, so you're not really stealing anything. But also I want to say we have a Facebook community. It is facebook.com/superpodcast. And this is really a great place for the most hardcore of our fans. It's a small percentage of our overall listeners, but it's the most active group. And on the Facebook page, we put up our regular show artwork that one of our friends of the show, Travis Heckle, does each and every week. Artwork dealing with different things we talk about on the show. We also put up exclusive videos. You know, maybe you heard Jim Cornette watching a match with us on the show. We put up the video so you can actually watch the match with the commentary dubbed in. A perfect sync. So we have that. We have all sorts of videos, pictures, programs. We do different polls. You can vote on the top 10. You can vote for our top 10 characters each and every week. And that's facebook.com/superpodcast. And pretty soon, probably within the next month, we're going to have t-shirts for sale because everyone's been demanding those. So please check it out. And the show again is the 605 Super Podcast, 605pod.com.
And then Twitter, did you mention Twitter at 605pod?
I didn't. On Twitter, it's at
Sorry.
605pod. We also have a list there. So if you want to see some of the approved parody accounts for show characters, it's in our list on that page. And also you can follow me on Twitter at Great Brian Last.
Oh, there's actually approved parodies.
Well,
okay,
because
there's so many of them now,
yeah,
right?
I mean, for a while there were 2 Denim Fritzes and they were kind of feuding with each other. So
Okay.
I had to spend a lot of time and officially pick the official Denim Fritz account for the show. There's, I think, multiple orgasmic Larry Nelsons. I had to figure out which one was the best one.
Okay.
And now people are just creating accounts for things that we're not even talking about really on the show, but they try to get in the mix. There's a fake George Goulas. You know, you mentioned the Mullet of Morton page. We haven't even talked about that on the show. And all of a sudden this guy's in the mix feuding with everyone. So it's fun.
Yeah. Though him and I gotta say him, Gibson, Mullet of Morton, Gibson, and Stan Lane. They're to me they're very funny. Their banter in their tweets are common. And actually, the Morton guy and Fritz are also the Denim Fritz guy, the approved guy. They're having a nice little fun little time too. It's just very entertaining. And I mean, and the thing about it is, if it pops up on your Twitter feed and you're listening to this, I noticed that a lot of times they're including at 605pod, and they're also doing the hashtag 605pod. So it's like, I guess it's like free advertisement too. I feel
like the Super Podcast, no disrespect to you or anyone else, but I feel like it's the most rewarding show if you're a hardcore listener, because there's so much going on Twitter. The Facebook page has been out of control lately. Someone started a Reddit page recently for the show. We always have artwork and videos and all sorts of exclusive stuff. So if you're like a hardcore listener of the show, it's just there's nonstop entertainment all week long, which is why this has become a full-time thing for me. And of course, every Friday, we do a video playlist. So if you listen to the show on Thursday or whenever you listen to it, Friday we put up a video playlist, and sometimes it's over 100 videos of just things we've talked about on the show, a complement to the show, so you could see the things we're talking about.
Yeah, I agree. What I like about it, and I tweeted this out yesterday to my followers from the BTT podcast Twitter page, is it's a perfect old school wrestling podcast discussion of things that we've brought on old school guys, but we also have newer guys on, because like I said, I've had on ROH TNA guys as well, but it's an old school podcast where you talk about things that maybe people would have forgotten about or haven't heard about in years, or just have never heard. The Polish Joe AWA stuff, I have listened to the first 2 that you guys have dropped. That's fascinating. That's some fascinating stuff, because I did not have cable when AWA first came on, and for me to then go back and be able to look at not the AWA stuff, but to remember what it was and hear more about it, and then listening to Polish Joe, it's fascinating. I mean, it's very interesting. He talked about the Super Clash stuff this week. And by the way, I looked it up. You and Bix were talking about the attendance. Super Clash 3, there was 1,672 people there.
Jesus.
According to Wikipedia. Let me.
That sounds right. That sounds right.
So when Polish Joe said there just wasn't nobody showed up, and well, he was right, because it was in a big place, and 1,600 people is not a lot. But, as people are listening to this, that's why I plugged it, and that's why I retweeted it. It's something that you need to check out if you're listening to our show. We've been around for a year, and you guys know I do not endorse many other podcasts. I endorse a few, and I will say this: 605 Super Podcast gets a ringing endorsement because you guys are doing. One, you're working hard. You can see the legwork that you and Bix are doing on it, and to me that says a lot.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate that.
Okay, everybody. Hopefully you enjoyed our discussion my discussion with the great Brian Last from the 605 Super Podcast. Brian was kind enough to give me, about an hour and 15 minutes of his time. And I got to tell you, Doc, for someone who did not grow up in the Mid-South territory, he was very, very informed about all of the angles and Watts and Mid-South and UWF and all that good stuff. I mean, he's had a lot of experience with tape trading, but the dude was he's real knowledgeable. And I mean, I'm not telling you anything you don't know. I mean, you've been listening to the 605 Super Podcast, right?
Yeah, it's one of the ones that is in my weekly rotation. Now you gotta be ready to really sit down and listen to something, because it is quite lengthy. But you know what? I listen to the whole thing every week, and the thing I really like about it is they go deep into some things, like you said, Mid-South, world class that we were around for. But then you learn things about the history of. For instance, this week they were really talking about the LaBelle territory in Los Angeles. So you get to learn stuff about that and the ties across the territory, because Chris Adams worked in both or all three. So, and then you hear crazy stories. The other thing that they do really well that I like is they really fill in the gap after the territories died, before kind of ECW came along. You and I kind of talk about it as the dark time, the dark period, but there was still independent wrestling going on and a lot of characters floating around the country. There's they bring a lot of guys on and talk about that time as well. So it's pretty interesting, because that was a real interesting time after Vince kind of, snatched up all the talent. So I listen every week, and it's in my weekly rotation. And I also listen to the podcast. Obviously, you guys know I listen to the podcast that Brian Last is the producer for, which is the Jim Cornette podcast on MLW as well. So I listen to quite a bit of Brian Last every week. So I'm glad he was able to come on the show.
Good dude, man. He I don't know if he's done many at this point. We really didn't talk about that, but his knowledge. He and I talked about the Polish Joe AWA guy that was really involved with AWA when they were with ESPN and all that. And I didn't have cable at that time, so I didn't get to watch it, but have seen a lot of stuff since then. And very interesting guy, Polish Joe, with some of the facts around how AWA got the ESPN deal, how AWA almost ended up on WGN, the Chicago Superstation. Just some fascinating stuff. And I had mentioned to him, you haven't heard it obviously because you weren't on with us. I had mentioned to him how I called it the dark period, and you did too. And he said, I don't want to call it the dark period. It truly is a period of time when wrestling, they were still, put it this way, wrestling then, we call it the dark period, but numbers wise across the nation was still drawing better numbers in the arenas and on TV than it is today. But so it's kind of weird when we call it the dark period. If that
well,
makes
and it
sense.
also coincides kind of with the dark period of us hitting high school and chasing pussy instead of PWI magazines. But whatever. Hey,
that part is very, very
can
true.
we stop blowing Brian Last and talk about, man, what a Money in the Bank pay-per-view? You've been on my ass to get the network now for several months, and I did. Just in time for the pay-per-view. I cannot believe Cena put over Styles like that. I cannot believe that the club came away with the tag team titles. Man, WWE delivered. What a Money in the Bank.
Doc, Today is June the 17th, 2016. This show is going to drop on June the 21st. What are you talking about? There's been no Money in the Bank. Money in the Bank 2016 has not happened yet.
What are you talking about?
Stupid son of a bitch.
Is that
Okay.
that
Congrats on getting the network.
it,
Maybe you watched Money in the Bank from, I don't know. Maybe you're watching something on YouTube. There has been no Money in the Bank. And
Sheamus came
no.
in as the surprise entrant and won the Money in the Bank, right?
Okay. Not quite. So, well, let's move on. That's a failed experiment with you trying to look up something on
How do I
the
get my money back from Vince?
you
Vince,
don't.
Vince.
You don't. It's June the 17th, Doc. As you can see, everybody, today's June the 17th, 2016. Money in the Bank is not till June the 19th. You guys know, as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we usually do a recap. We usually talk about the week that was in professional wrestling. We're not going to be able to record our normal Tuesday show where we discuss Raw and all the good things that happened from the week before and Money in the Bank, where we'll do a Money in the Bank review. So what we're doing today is a little bit of a special episode for you in this week where Doc and I are going to talk about a number of different things, mainly being Brian Last's show, the 605 Super Podcast, which we just kind of recapped. And yes, we were blowing Brian Last because we think it's a really good show with him and David Bixenspan. Drive Time Radio. It's a 4-hour marathon weekly, but the guys do a good job. Check them out, 605 Super at 605 Pod on Twitter. But so this week, what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about the top 5 wrestlers that we would choose if we were starting a professional wrestling promotion. The key is top 5 wrestlers. We're not talking about top 5 bookers or promoters. We're talking about wrestlers. What wrestlers we would hire from the top 5, or that we organize as our top 5, so to say. Before we do that, though, I do want to plug a couple of things. Make sure you check us out on Facebook, facebook.com/booking the territory, and then click that shop now button. Use promo code SHIRTOID20, get 20% off of your order. That's SHIRTOID20 when you click the shop now button, and hit the like button on Facebook while you're on there and like our page so we can grow our numbers. Also, want to say follow us on Twitter at BTT_podcast. And then the other thing I have to do is say thanks to everyone who retweeted the Booking the Territory podcast t-shirt tweet. We did get 25 tweets, so by the time this comes out, I would have selected a random person out of a hat to receive a free BTT podcast t-shirt. So I appreciate everybody who retweeted it. I think we were at 30 retweets, so we beat it by 5. And I want to also plug IWR, Imperial Wrestling Revolution. Oaklandmania, Doc. I bet you can't wait, right?
Oh, we're heading up, right?
I don't know about you, but
I got something in the mail that said I haven't opened it, but it did say for official use only from IWR.
Bullshit. That's their ticket to say don't come up here. So anyway, we got IWR. July 16th is in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and then we got July 17th, Oklahoma City for Oaklandmania. That Oklahoma City card, we've talked about it a few times on the show. You've heard me say it the last few weeks. It's stacked. It's just packed. I mean, the Hardys, Jim Ross, MVP, Donovan Dijak, Warbeard Hansen, Ray Rowe. Jesus, I'm drawing a blank now, but it's
Isn't
stacked.
that enough? Jesus, what else do
But yeah,
people want?
I didn't even scratch the surface when I mentioned those names. Who's ROH? I'm drawing a blank. The Peacock.
Dalton
Who's
Castle.
Dalton Castle. Yes, I'm like drawing an extreme blank. So Dalton Castle, gonna be just gonna be a fantastic card. I mean, they're calling it Oaklandmania for a reason. You shouldn't. Sting's gonna be there. How could I forget about Sting? Moose is gonna be there. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, Jeff Jarrett, Matt Sydal. Is that not enough for you? Did I say MVP and did I say EC3 and Roddy Strong? There you go. Loaded card. Just you don't want to miss it. It's Sunday, July 17th, 2016, 6 p.m. live at the Cox Convention Center, which, Doc, you used to live up there. That's a pretty damn big building, isn't it?
I think it seats about 13,000.
13,000. So, hey, honestly, if they put half of that in there, that's going to be a freaking serious house for it. Keep in mind, this is an independent wrestling show. This is not any type of major, WWE production. This is an independent wrestling show. So good stuff.
Hey,
Other thing I want to.
Hey, I know what you're about to talk about. It's going to be about how Harper's going to get X-rated here in a little bit, right?
Yeah, Harper's not on the show this week because we're recording it in the middle of our off day from work. So Harper's not on today, and he won't be on with us since we're not recording on Tuesday. But I am gonna plug our promotion that we're kind of partnered with. I guess it's safe to say Wildcat Sports and Entertainment. They're gonna present X rated. I guess the two X's are because this is the second one. Saturday, June 25th. It's at the Shamrock Bar and Grill. The reason it is obviously X-rated is it's considered a adults only show. Now it doesn't mean it's porn or anything, obviously, but X-rated adults only show. The card is just super stacked. I mean, Tracy Smothers, old ECW guy, Joel Gertner, BWO ECW, Al Snow. Just to name a few, those are the names. And they've announced some special surprise that's going to be there June 25th at the Shamrock Bar and Grill. I don't know what that is. Harper and I hadn't talked about it. Bell time is 7 p.m. Doors open 5:30. Harper said last week if you are going, make sure you get there early. So just be sure you do that. But they sold it out last year. I expect them to do the same. That's Wildcat Sports and Entertainment. If you want more information, go to their Facebook page, Wildcat with a K. Wildcat with a K. All right, Doc. So we can jump into things now, man, since I got all the plugs out the way. Let's do it like this. We'll start with you. You'll give your number 5, and then I'll give my number 5. And then I'll give my number 4, and then you give your number 4. We'll kind of go back and forth that way. Does that make sense?
So let's just make sure so that we tell everybody why we're picking the wrestlers. This isn't our favorite wrestler.
Oh yeah, right.
This isn't the biggest heel. This is if I'm writing checks, which means I'm trying to draw money, and I'm starting a promotion so that I can stay in business and not have to put a second mortgage on my house for the long term. I want a career at this. Who am I going to have 5 people in my territory?
I got plenty of that T-shirt money, so I got a little bit of a buffer.
You motherfucker. The rest of us are out here trying to grind out a living.
But to your point, top 5 wrestlers starting a promotion. If you're starting with your own money, who you would go with in the promotion?
My number 5. Menace to Society.
Now you're full of bullshit. Hey, I do want to say this. So you know what? I'll save the poll that I ran on Twitter today because we got a good bit of votes for it. And I want to announce what the fans chose as the 4 people that I did list. But we'll do ours first, and then we'll choose. We'll look at what the fans chose. So go ahead. You're number 5. Who do you have?
I'm gonna start with number 1 because I'm gonna get it out of the way.
No. That's not how you do it. Come on, man.
Okay.
Number 5.
My number 5. Terry Funk. I want a guy. I think in his prime, he brings so much to the table because he's a former NWA World Heavyweight Champion. He reinvented himself in the late 80s. He reinvented himself again in the 90s as a hardcore legend. He's willing to try and do anything, and he's willing to reinvent himself. And so that kind of guy is going to have a long-term ability to come in and draw money and be crazy and do crazy shit. And he's the veteran in the locker room. He's the guy that has the history back to the Carney days in his family that can pass on the roots of this and be a presence in the locker room.
All right. Well, damn, that's a pretty interesting pick. I gotta admit that one kind of shocks me. Not because Funk is not deserving of it, but man, I always remember what Paul Lee said about Terry when they were in the middle of ECW and ECW was starting to really get some traction. I remember Paul Lee saying Terry was one of the only old timers who was embracing what they were doing. So to your point, he did reinvent himself. He became anew, so to say. He became a new version of himself. And, coming from somebody who at that point had been in the business for, God, by 96, Funk had been doing it over 20 years at that point.
No, almost over 30.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I said, over 20 years at that point. So, but anyway, yeah, I got to admit, the guy reinvented himself, and he was a different person even then, and he continued to reinvent himself. I mean, even once the hardcore phase was quote unquote going away.
And
I mean,
don't
he
think he might
still
not be wrestling somewhere this weekend either.
the funkster cannot die, man. He just keeps on going. That's for damn sure.
And that's the other thing is I tried to stay away from guys that had brief runs because I'm here to make money forever.
Right. Okay, I get you. I get you. Well, let me say this. Since it's my fucking show, I cheated. You know what I mean by that? I didn't choose 5. I chose 6 because I had a conundrum that I wanted to deal with. Brian Lass and I, when we were talking, recording the first part of the show, we were talking about Mid South, and Brian Lass brought up a name to me. You're gonna hate this, but I don't really give a fuck. Brian Lass brought up a name to me, and he asked me a question about a guy in Mid South, and I said, you know what? Yeah, nobody could have replaced him once he was gone. So anyway, I'm going to say number 6. I'm going to say a couple of things about him, and then I'm going to move to my number 5. Number 6, the Junkyard Dog. Say what you want about the dog. The dog was the hottest babyface that you could imagine for that point in time in Mid-South. And the reason I would hire the dog is because whether you think he was a great wrestler or not, he could get people in the building. And that's one of the main things you look at. He could talk people in the building. He had charisma, and he was the dog, man. So I got to go with the dog. Hey, let's not forget, man. He was one of those talents that Vince grabbed a hold of from Mid South, and just when he raided Mid South. So keep that point in mind. Now, I get the dog out the way. I had to mention that. Ric Flair would be my number 5 because while the dog was a hell of a babyface, Ric Flair. I mean, is there a better heel for the territory era and what Ric Flair did 365 days a year, 6 days a week and twice on Sunday? I don't know. I don't think there is. And on top of that, not only was Flair good during his territory days, but once cable television came around and he ended up, then on WWE and then WCW. And then even after WCW was bought, through the mid 2000s, he was still working. Gotta say, Ric Flair, number 5, would be my number 5 pick. Um, Doc, you can either comment on those two briefly and then move to your number 4. I'll move to number 4 after you say your piece. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, the dog definitely was I mean, I had to cut some people out of my list, so I didn't know we could cheat. Um, glad that you.
Hey,
Glad.
I'm the whole fucking show at BTT. I make the rules, brother.
So, no, I mean, you really have to understand that Bill Watts was really, really intelligent on that, on how they used the junkyard dog in that part of the country. And again, part of it might have been the time period where you didn't have to be Lou Thez out there, but some of it was accentuating the positives and hiding the weaknesses because he was never known as the best worker. But you're right, he was over like a motherfucker. And then this may not come as a surprise, but I have a feeling we'll talk about Rick a little bit later on. So,
Okay. All right, number 4. My number 4 pick, Undertaker.
okay.
I mean, do I really need to explain how long's the guy been at it now? I mean, we're talking about a guy who got his start in Texas, um,
What?
went to WCW, and then ends up in WWF, which is now WWE, and he's still at it. I've heard Austin say before he doesn't know if anybody else could have pulled off what that guy's pulled off with the Undertaker gimmick. And I would have to agree. I look at how you talked about Funk reinventing himself. The guy is nothing like he was in WCW, and yet he's still at it, still making money, still drawing people into the building. He's the Undertaker. Is there not a better entrant in all of professional wrestling, in the history of professional wrestling? I don't know. I don't know if there is. I mean, that's not for, it can be discussed, but I think the Undertaker, I got him at number 4.
He's not on my list,
I figured he wouldn't be.
but anybody who's around the wrestling business and I'm not saying I am, but I am, you always hear that guy spoken with the utmost respect. They said that, Vince treats him like a damn near like a son, but that everybody who comes in contact with him speaks highly of the guy. And so how many people do you know in the wrestling business? You've been in the wrestling business. How many people get spoken of unanimously well,
Yeah,
And so,
I agree.
and I think what I got out of Funk in a different way was kind of what you're getting at with the Undertaker, which is he's the conscience of the locker room as well.
Yeah,
Whereas they said he held wrestlers court, he keeps everybody in line because everybody looks to him to set the example.
yeah, most definitely. Well, who you got for number 4?
Number 4, I got the hot rod Roddy Piper.
Yeah. I mean, I can't disagree with that. I mean, I'm actually shocked I didn't think of him.
Couple of reasons I've got him. And one of them is something that you and our guest on last week's show, Kevin Gill, talked about, is that without Roddy Piper, there's no Hulkamania. And you're not going to find the Hulk on my list. Fuck that big, tall, racist piece of shit. I've never liked Hulk Hogan, not one day of my life, not when I was a little kid, not when I was a mark, not when damn it, it's real to me. I never liked that dude. Not his Thunder Lips and Rocky, whatever. Never liked that guy. But what I do like about Roddy Piper is a couple of things. He could talk him in the building. He could generate white hot heat. He knew how to work. He knew why you're working the way you're working. The other thing is if I'm starting a promotion, I've heard stories. One of the things Kevin Gill talked about is how giving and nice the guy was. So I mean, you talk about that in a locker room, and just you can't have 10 guys that are driving the car at the same time. So you need, that kind of different personality mix. But Hot Rod, at the time the business was exploding on the national level, was right there as a catalyst to make it go and to be a heel and to talk shit. And I like that.
Yeah, I hate to disclose this, but I don't have him on my top 5, and now I'm like, man, where would I put him based on the fact that there's who I have above number 4 at this point. But obviously, Roddy Piper is one of the best ever. See, one of the hard things about doing a top 5 is there's going to be somebody left. There's going to be not somebody. There's going to be people left off that you would normally not, want to leave off of any list, if that makes sense. It'd probably be easier to do a top 10, but that's what makes the top 5 so hard. But okay, so you got Piper number 4. Who you got number 3?
Ooh, baby, I'm hotter than 6 suns, if you will. I got the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, at number 3 because anybody who can connect with the common man can get the common man come to see him get whooped and then get revenge. And I'm trying to get people talk. I'm between him and Dusty and Funk right now. I'm gonna have to find bigger buildings to run my promotion in. That's all I got to say. We're gonna have old school white hot heat, and we're gonna be printing money. Dusty Rhodes. I mean, you talk about a guy who was a heel at the beginning, came up, with Murdoch and Ray Stevens and those guys, and I mean, you talk about Ric Flair. He's the guy that wanted to be. Ric Flair wanted to be Dusty Rhodes. He wanted to be Ricky Rhodes when he came in. That right there tells you everything you need to know about Dusty. And then Dusty morphs into the son of a plumber. That is as the cable is exploding, he's fighting off the horsemen and just all the memorable things that go with that. And then again, I'm looking at a guy in Dusty that in his later years, you talk about all the people that have been down at NXT or FCW or whatever it is, and they all the trainees, and they talk about how Dusty was giving and Dusty would teach. And so again, I'm looking for somebody who could draw them in the building, but that also is building the rest of my roster up so that we can have lots of people that can draw money.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I know Tyrone Evans He talks about it.
Byron
Michael
Wilcott
Tarver,
back on episode 2, Big Daddy Yum Yum was talking about him.
Dusty.
Yeah.
Yep, he talking about how great Dusty was, how good of a dude he was, just overall. I mean, yeah, he's another guy. Nobody ever says a bad thing about him. I mean, they always have good stuff to say about Dusty. So, man, I have no disagreement. Dusty was the man. Dusty was the man. All right, so that was your number 3, right?
Yep.
Okay, my number 3, The Rock. Do I really need to?
I didn't have him on my list.
That's pitiful. But The Rock. I mean, The Rock. Look, the he did what I think they should do with Reigns. Not saying Roman Reigns could pull off what The Rock did. It was, they tried to force The Rock as a baby down people's throat. It didn't work. Rock became a heel, was so good that they then loved him, and now they'll love him forever.
There's one big problem with what you just mentioned. There's
no,
one guy,
Reigns can't.
right.
Reigns doesn't have the mouthpiece. I understand that. The point I was making was the whole babyface aspect of it. How they're trying to, stuff Reigns down people's throats. They try to do The Rock. They try to do the same thing with The Rock. But The Rock, I feel, that era. It's hard to say. I mean, him. That whole attitude era, which to me is a little overrated. It wasn't, it was a great era. Don't get me wrong, but look, it is a little overrated. But Rock was a big part of that, and I without The Rock, I just don't think you don't have the attitude era. For one, he's one of the guys that's a big part of that. So I got to go with The Rock. The Rock is my number 3 on the list. Now you said The Rock didn't make your list.
He didn't make my list, and here's why. And he's sitting right outside. If we had that top 10, I think he'd be there. And the reason, and this is, you're going to go, you're an idiot, whatever. I was looking at I want to make money and have a promotion that lasts a long time. And right when I'm ready to pop the territory, he's got to go make a movie. And so I wanted guys that spent a lot of time in the business. And the tiebreaker, and you'll see in a minute, on somebody who got the nod over him on my list was he went away and he left the business. And I was looking for people that wanted to be there 100% of the time. Is he a once in a generation personality? I watched his show Ballers on HBO. That's great, but he's not in the ring full time. So that was kind of nothing against him, but I mean, we're talking 5 all time. He didn't make my cut.
No, I mean, hey, I agree. One of the things that Cena said about him was the fact that, he would leave. And that was a shoot, Cena, when they were working that program before that first WrestleMania that they worked each other. Cena said that, he's like you come and go. I'm here all the time. So it's something. Look, and that was the honest to God truth when Cena said that. He wasn't just saying it for his health. So I mean, I can see that part. I put him on there, and that's why that's why this poll is an opinion thing or ranking top 5 is an opinion thing.
We ain't said nobody's name yet that you can't draw money with.
Oh, I mean, you're not going to unless you fucking put.
Except earlier when I said menace to society, that might have been a problem.
That fucking guy couldn't draw no money. He had no drawing power. So
at least he had no problem doing the job. He was used to it, right?
Something like that. Pin me, pay me. Something like that. Pin me, pay me. All right. Okay, I gave my number 3. Let me give my number 2. Let me tell you something, baby. That angle right there made me hotter than 6 suns, baby. Dusty Rhodes, American Dream. I mean, we just talked about him a little while ago, but a guy who could talk people into the building. Who could ever forget the hard times promo? Ric Flair, you put hard times on American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. So
and
come on, man.
People talk about that promo, and sure, it was very singular in nature. But how many other promos that he gave that maybe weren't that good, but were still better than what everybody else but Rick maybe was doing?
Very true. Dusty was one of a kind. I mean, at that era. But I mean, let me say this. Do you remember? Well, no, you might not, because you say you never used to buy pay-per-views back in the day, and neither did I. So what am I talking about? Never mind. Don't worry about it. I was gonna ask you if you remember the time period when, because did he go he went? That was the thing about Dusty. You talk about longevity. He went 10 years in between world title reigns. Remember that?
Here's something you may not. Do you remember this part? He went and fought Steve Corino in ECW.
I forgot about that. Yeah, you're right. You're right. You're right. American Dream was versatile, man. American
American
Dream.
Dusty Rhodes was in ECW. I mean, come on.
Yeah. Yeah. That's true. All right. So that was my number 2. Who you got for number 2?
This is the one that I think will surprise you more than anybody else on my list. More than Terry Funk, anybody else.
Oh, I know what you're gonna say just because of that.
Who?
Bret Hart.
No.
Okay.
My number 2 is John Cena.
Jesus fucking Christ.
And you want me to tell you why? I ain't bullshitting here.
Let's hear this fucking explanation.
Okay, first of all, that guy is incredibly dedicated. So if I'm running a promotion, he's a company man, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he's gonna be the guy that will do the radio. He's gonna be the guy that does the appearances. He's gonna be the guy that gives 110, not be at the bar because he's about promoting my show. So there's one reason. The other reason, and this is something, there's a couple others. One is boo him or like him, he generates a reaction every Monday night this many years into it. The other thing is that guy's been on top for so long, and he's in his late 30s, and you know what that feels like, and I know what that feels like, and to recuperate as fast as he did from that recent shoulder surgery, he's durable, he's driven even at this point in his career. Here's the other thing, and this is the one that gets me, because my other wrestlers, I mean, you talk about Dusty and Terry Funk and Piper, and those guys are for, you know, kind of Cena's for the kids, and I've watched it with my son who's 4, who doesn't know anything about wrestling, but when John Cena came back and he sees the "You Can't See Me" and Cena comes out, he grabs his attention, and like nobody else on the roster. And so he has an undeniable star power with the kids, and it's not apathy about hating him for the other fans. He draws a reaction. He's been incredibly durable for a long time under a really rigorous schedule. And he's crossover enough that he's the Rock without leaving, you know? He's not as and that's where I said I picked him over The Rock. Was The Rock left and Cena has chosen to stay. Now The Rock's a bigger star in the world of entertainment, but The Rock's not going to be there Monday night, and John Cena will.
I can't disagree with the fact that Cena's durable, but let's not be mistaken. He ain't fucking Ric Flair in his prime with durability either. He ain't going fucking 6 days a week and twice on Sunday. So his durability, sure, and he recovers quickly, sure, but he ain't making my top 5. I need 10 more years out of him before I say that.
Okay.
People say I'm a fucking Cena hater. I give him a lot of credit. He's got Nikki Bella. But yeah. So all right. Well, I think just based on your fucking top 5, I could tell you who your number 1 is. But I'll let that roll off your tongue.
Well, that's why I said we should start at number 1 and go backwards, because it's no secret that if I'm starting a promotion and I have a draft, I'm picking Ric Flair number 1, and I thought about just picking Ric Flair all 5. You know, there's been nobody since the time I started watching wrestling at about 8 in 1982 that has captured and captivated my attention more than Ric Flair, more than watching him be the world champion. The man, I was never a WWF guy in the 80s. I mean, I was aware of it through the magazines, but I mean, we lived and breathed the NWA, and for the vast majority of those formative years, he was the world champion, the standard bearer, the mark of excellence. You know, we talked about on the show a couple of weeks ago about Muhammad Ali, about a guy that could talk him in the building and then back it up. So is Ric Flair Lou Thez? No, nobody's going to say that. And some people have taken shots at Rick having the same amount of matches. But again, you start talking about being able to talk and, you know, put him right up there with Dusty as 1A and 1B, and then get on the road and be reliable and dependable and durable, and being able to tell that story for 60 minutes a night, 6 nights a week. There's just, to me, that's the pinnacle. And then to start what was really the flagship of what was the first stable that really did business and did damage and was, you know, an innovator in that regard as well, being the Horsemen. I don't think there's anybody else to put in that spot, but apparently you think differently and like to be wrong because you put him at number 5. But whatever.
Number 5 is not an insult. You got to rank him somewhere. Obviously, Ric Flair is the. Um, when I think back to the territory days, I mean, he'd come into the territory, he'd defend the belt. It's funny because I guess you kind of knew he'd never lose, but you still kind of got lost in it.
And
I mean,
and before he came, you'd get the videotape that was sent in from the Carolinas with the Carolina backdrop where he was talking about where he was going to do to Chris Adams or David Von Erich or whoever he was fighting Gordy when he was coming through. So
yeah,
that was big a deal when the champion was on, because you know what? And this is something we talk about today, and I know it's different. You didn't see him all the time.
No, he was special. Well, you saw him. I guess you kind of did by that point because they were on TBS, I believe. So if you had cable, but see, I didn't get that until the later 80s.
You didn't
I was
cable until probably like 3 or 4 years ago. You poor motherfucker.
Whatever. But you're right. You didn't see him every week, and when he came into the territory, he was gonna defend the belt. And I mean, Ric Flair was special. He was the dirtiest player in the game, and he's still an outstanding talent. Just don't give him a script. And when I say talent, I mean he can still talk. I mean, it's that hadn't gone away, but they give him a script and he's back there trying to memorize it. And we talk about it on the show all the time. How he's standing back there as Charlotte's drowning. He's got his dick in his hand.
Well, and here's the thing is that and I get what the fans say. As much as I hate to admit it, I mean, I haven't enjoyed his run with Charlotte. I don't like all the just straight to tears and sort of him having to really play second banana and try to get her over. But if you want a recent example in the last 10 years that Ric Flair still had it, go look at him and Jay Lethal get it on in TNA, where they were doing battle against each other and cutting promos on one another. And his ability to, really make Jay Lethal look great, even though Jay Lethal doesn't need a lot of help with that.
Right. Exactly. No disagreement. All right. Well, so you got Flair. Maybe through process of elimination, you can kind of figure out who I got number 1. I will tell you this
Tommy
before
Rich.
I say it.
Is it Tommy Rich?
Fuck,
he's a former NWA world champion.
I don't give a flying fuck what Tommy Rich did in the NWA. The number 1
Rock and Roll Express.
Why would you say that? The number 1 person. No, it's not Bret Hart. Bret didn't even make my top 5. Look. I bet that shocked you because I'm a Bret. I'm a Bret Hart guy.
You're not that silly to put him at number 1.
Well, I got to go with Stone Cold Steve Austin. I mean, come on now. Is there anybody who drew more money in that time period?
He was my number 6. He was the guy. If I had got to cheat like you did, he would have been my number 6. So go ahead, tell us about you.
No, go ahead.
The reason he did not make my top 5, and it's the short time he was on top, and his injury-prone nature, which is what drew me away from him. Because for the couple of years that he was truly on top, it was one of the most enjoyable wrestling. I will never forget him hitting Vince with the bedpan, or he'd turn around in the ambulance driving it and run back there and beat up somebody laying in the back of the ambulance, or the time he was passing out beers when he won control of WWE at the Titan Towers. I mean, just fantastic. It's just if I want somebody who could was a little less injury prone, with bad wheels and bad neck. That's it.
I hear you. I mean, hey, fair point. I'm happy, man. We made it through a whole episode segment of you and I, and you didn't go all heel on people. I mean, that's very, very admirable of you. You like to try to be the heel, and you actually
maybe
made it
if we did our show at a respectable hour like this instead of at the crack of midnight during the week, I would be in a much better mood.
Well, I'm saving you the trouble this week.
And maybe if you cut me in on some of that T-shirt money, I'd even I'd be white meat babyface.
Okay. So here's the thing. I did run a poll today as we're recording this on which legends. Now, Facebook polls are a little different. So Twitter polls are a little different. You only can put up to 4 people. So what I did was I said, which of these wrestling legends do you hire first if you are starting a promotion?
Oh, okay. So can I there's a couple I thought were interesting that neither of us picked.
Well, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, obviously neither of us picked the Hulkster brother.
Well, Hulk got a write-in vote on Twitter, but
Was
I'll
it
tell
from
you about
Hulk's
that in a
head?
minute. It actually wasn't from Hulk's head, but Hulk's head did tell me, how did you leave the most recognized wrestler? How did you leave out the most recognized wrestler ever, Jack? And he's got a picture of Hulk with his sunglasses and bandana pointing at me. And so I said I do accept write-in votes. And some guy, Tommy at Legendary Known, tweeted back, I write in Hulk's head, Jack. So Hulk's head got a write-in vote.
Well, so there is Hulk, the Hulkster, and like I've already told you, I was never a Hulkster fan, and here's the other thing, I don't want to put up with somebody who's going to have creative control, so I tell him, and he goes, so that's the finish, and then he doesn't want to play ball and lay down in the middle of the ring and lose. So
don't piss off Hulk's head, man.
no, he's great, but that's
okay.
not Hulk Hogan. So
Okay.
I'm aware of what a parody account is.
I didn't know you were that smart.
I'm not.
Considering you have trouble with Twitter and you can't get on your own Twitter now, and you're back to trolling from your wife's Twitter. Yeah, I just thought I'd bring that up.
Here's another one that we didn't pick. Man calls Sting.
Yeah, just one of those things. I mean, you only got 5 slots.
I was never the hugest Sting fan either, but
Well, I can tell you right now, if Nate Milton would have been on here, Sting would have been number 1 probably.
well then well, that's not my problem.
Okay.
This isn't his podcast. It's mine.
Okay. Jesus. Okay. Who else got left off while you're talking? Is that it?
Sure. Well, the other thing is you used a regional favorite like Junkyard Dog. I did give Kerry Von Erich consideration, but I mean, shit. Do you really want somebody who maybe can't spell their own name because they're so fucked up to be on your roster? So
the story One Man Gang tells, that time he was on the show, and when Kerry was supposed to be working Rick in the freaking main event of the Sportatorium, and Kerry was in the back in his car with his boots tied to each other, because he was so messed up.
and so yeah, if we changed the topic of this to the most over wrestlers of all time, then I think Hulk and Kerry Von Erich get some serious consideration, but given the topic, I'll leave those guys off.
Yeah, I agree.
And we're gonna they're probably, well, I don't know if our fans are that smart, but some of them out there might be thinking about some of the old days, the Briscoe. They don't know who that is though. Never mind.
Well, the thing is, I mean, this is going to be determined by somebody's age too, because I mean, we could have a 25-year-old listening to this show who I mean, in all reality, they're going to have trouble, maybe even with definitely with a Dusty Rhodes, but they didn't see the early years of the Undertaker, and they don't remember Rick's early years. I mean, they may remember Rick in the mid 2000s. I mean, you got people listening to the show, if they're 20 years old, how much do they really remember about Austin?
True. Hey, we said
just
that when Sting came into WWE, how many kids were like, "Who the fuck is this old man?"
Right. I mean, you and I'll admit, I was like, I lost my mind. I figured, fuck, this is great. But you had a whole segment. If you had people who were watching TNA, there was a generation who, when Sting made his appearance, they wouldn't have known who they were. Now, I will say this. The network does help with that, because my kid knew who he was, but it was based on the network and in the older stuff he had watched.
You know who else I thought about picking for my top 5 was for my promotion was Chris Benoit. So if anybody gets out of line, he'll just kill him.
Oh, Jesus Christ. That's real classy of you. Real fucking classy.
Hey, Benoit, can you take this guy out?
Shut up. Stop being a fucking asshole. That's just wrong.
What did the
poll?
Yeah, what did the simpletons have to say?
They're not simpletons, asshole. Okay, so here it is. The question was, which of these wrestling legends do you hire first if you are starting a wrestling promotion? And it only lets you list 4 choices. So Hulk Hogan got in one write-in vote. Everything else was 170 votes, which that's pretty good on Twitter, because I mean, even though we got over 4,000 followers, everybody's not going to see everyone won't see every single tweet that you put out there. So, but no, Steve Austin was listed, Ric Flair was listed, Dusty Rhodes was listed, and The Rock was listed. Again, 170 votes here. I'm gonna go lower to higher. Ric Flair got 17% of the votes, so he was the fourth choice for the fans, for the listeners.
You can.
Dusty
I've already
Rhodes
quit listening.
Dusty Rhodes got 18% of the vote, so he was the number 3 choice for the listeners. The Rock got 26% of the vote, so he was the second pick for the listeners, and Steve Austin got 39% of the vote, so he was the number 1 pick. So, I mean, Rick and Dusty were what and what. I mean, 18 and 17, that's real close. You could do the math on 170 votes. Tell me the vote difference on it. That's not a lot, though. The Rock, you know, 26% and Austin 39%. I mean, it was real close. I mean, it wasn't, let me say this, even between 39 and 26%, that's not Austin running away with it.
And here's the thing. I mean, Austin, I listen to Austin's podcast, and I don't watch the shows, but I mean, Austin was another transcendent superstar. The thing you have to remember is that that Austin also had The Rock to dance with too. They had each other.
Well,
And that goes back.
see,
That goes back
that's
to.
why I included The Rock in mine. That's exactly why. That's why I had The Rock in mind, and that's why Dusty and Ric Flair were both in mine, because those two like those were pairs that had each other. I mean, come on, Dusty and Rick during some of that NWA stuff was fabulous TV. Was great stuff. I mean, and same thing with Austin and Rock. Same thing. They had each other. I agree 100%. They had each other to dance with. No disagreement. And to draw this home, because we usually do a current review show. Well, who's got who to dance with now? When we're watching Raw and we're watching everything else, who's dancing with who to
Oh,
make
I'm
it
sure
great?
they'll figure out a way before year's end to get Cena and Orton back together.
Let's hope not. Let's hope not. But we're gonna head towards wrapping things up. So just again, real quick, on the Facebook page, check us out, facebook.com/booking the territory. Promo code ShirtOID20 when you click the Shop Now button on Facebook, and that'll give you 20% off of your order. Appreciate everybody who has bought a t-shirt. We thank you very much for that. Follow us on Twitter at BTT_podcast. And then don't forget Imperial Wrestling Revolution, July 16th in Shawnee, Oklahoma, and July 17th in Oklahoma City for Oklahomania. Huge, huge card. If you need to know who was on the card, go back to the beginning of the episode, or beginning right after we wrapped up with the great Brian Last, and you will hear everyone who's on it. Headlined by Sting, Jim Cornette. Jim Ross will be there, just to name a few. And then we got Wildcat Sports X-Rated Saturday, June 25th with the BWO, Blue Meanie, Stevie Richards, Al Snow will be there, Tracy Smothers, Joel Gertner, the quintessential stud muffin. That's in New Orleans, Louisiana. Bell time 7 p.m. at the Shamrock Bar and Grill. As Harper said, if you're going, get there early. I will say this, if you're anywhere close to New Orleans, hour away, 2 hours away, and you're an adult, it's probably worth your time. To go check it out. Great night of professional wrestling. But it's adults only, so keep that in mind. I think that's all I got, Doc. What do you got? Anything before we send the fans out of here?
By the time this comes out, Game 7 of the NBA Finals.
Oh yes, I'm glad you said that.
So,
Go ahead.
So there's one of two potential outcomes, but either Golden State wins or Cleveland wins. But let's be clear about this. There's a work in play here. I don't care who wins. This game, there is an invisible hand. The bookers have spoken, and this is a work. So that's all. I sat there last night watching this and going, I was flipping back and forth between SmackDown and the finals, and I couldn't decide which one was the bigger work.
I love this discussion, because
at least the professionals over on WWE were making it look good. If they were as sloppy as the NBA was last night, they'd have had both workers in the ring with a microphone calling their spot so everybody could hear it.
I love this discussion, because I'm the one who kept telling you for a long time, based on my mentor, my trainer, Rugged Rod Price, Hardway Rod Price, the California Stud, always taught me and told me, brother, it's all a work, talking about pro sports. And something, man, I tried to tell you, and all of a sudden now you're finally coming around, and you're like, oh, bro, it's a work. I told you that, man. And here's the thing, because I got shit on Twitter last night from a few people. Look, I hear people going, well, if it's a work, who's going to win on Sunday? You know what? It doesn't
It doesn't
fucking matter
matter.
who wins on
They
Sunday.
got your money.
Because they got it to a game 7. You know what? Just like Hulk Hogan in his fucking creative control, he's got the fucking merch money and he's got the ticket gate money. And if you think that ain't a lot, he's fucking running to the bank with it. So let me tell you something, assholes. It don't matter. It doesn't matter who wins Sunday because the bottom line is the tickets were sold, the fucking TV's being done, the commercials are paid for, all that's done. Whoever wins, the bookers don't care at
The
this
marks
point.
are out there. I'm worried about who wins and loses, and the bookers are counting the money.
Yeah, it don't matter who gets a strap right now. The gate's done. It's paid for. And here's the thing. This is the culmination of a feud to circle it back to wrestling terms. The feud is going to end on Sunday. It's over.
The blow off.
So whoever it's a blow off match. So whoever gets the strap is who gets the strap. It's probably going to be a shoot on Sunday while everything else has been a work. So don't give me no bullshit. Some people are getting mad at me. And I'm not talking about you, Kyrus, if you're listening, man. I'm not gonna say you were getting mad at me because we talked and it was cool. But yeah, man, I got a few tweets about people going, oh, this is bullshit. It's not a work. I'm like, what the fuck ever, man.
Everything in life is a work.
It's a work, brother. And I'm gonna say it like Rod used to tell me. We were on the road one night. It was a long drive coming back from Texas. We were talking about the Saints, and we were talking about how the Saints would never win a Super Bowl. This is obviously pre-Super Bowl, well before 2009, because I was done with the wrestling business by then. He looked at me when we were talking about it. He goes, "Brother, it's all a work." And that's pro sports in a nutshell. It's all a work. And if you think it's not a work, I don't know what to tell you. Matter of fact, I don't want to make an announcement, but me and Doc are kicking around an idea. We may start covering pro sports on a weekly show like it's a work. And deciding, how they booked it, if they booked the finish right. So don't be surprised if come football season we start talking about an NFL game like the Cowboys, and we'll start arguing about, well, I would have did the finish like this, and I would have did the finish like that. But no, this is what they did, and it sucks. What a bad work it was. Anyway, we'll see. We don't want to say it just yet, but that may be the
Well, I
case.
already told you that when the Cowboys lose, it was a work, and when we win, it was a shoot.
Of course, 'cause you're an idiot. You're a fucking idiot. Or as
Hey.
Jericho says, you stupid idiot.
Can I say the tagline this week since Harper's not here?
Yeah, you can say the tagline since we're about to get out of here. So hit it, Doc.
Book it, bitch!
That was bad. That was bad. Let me do it. I'm gonna say it like Harper says. Book it, bitch.
So I kick back and chill, just show you how I live now.